The last thing I expected at my father's funeral was to smile. Yet there I stood, clutching a letter that would change everything, fighting back an inappropriate grin while my brother Sergio sobbed dramatically into our mother's shoulder. I'm Alice, and for 32 years, I've been the family disappointment, the shadow child, the one who could never quite measure up to precious Sergio's achievements. But today was different. Ms. Wilkinson? A tall man in a crisp suit approached me as the other mourners began filtering out of the cemetery. I'm Carson King, your father's attorney. We need to discuss the reading of the will. I nodded, already knowing what was coming. Dad might have ignored me in life, but in death he'd finally seen me. The next day we gathered in Carson's office. The leather chairs squeaked as Sergio shifted impatiently, while Mom sat rigid, her face a mask of careful composure. I kept my eyes fixed on the mahogany desk, remembering the last conversation I'd had with Dad. Alice, Carson began, clearing his throat. Your father made some significant changes to his will in his final months. Sergio leaned forward. Changes? What changes? I watched my brother's face as Carson continued reading. The colour drained from his cheeks when the attorney announced that the entire estate, the house, the business, everything had been left to me. This is impossible, Sergio exploded, jumping to his feet. Dad would never— Sit down, Mom snapped, her voice trembling. She turned to Carson. There must be some mistake. Wilson always intended for Sergio to inherit the business. He's been grooming him for years. The documentation is quite clear, Carson replied, sliding his glasses up his nose. Mr. Wilkinson was of sound mind when he made these changes. Everything has been left to Alice, including full control of Wilkinson Industries. My phone buzzed. A text from Luna. How's it going? Did they flip? I typed back quickly. Better than we planned. Stand by. I'll contest this, Sergio declared, pacing the office. Dad wasn't thinking clearly. Alice probably manipulated him somehow. She's always been jealous of me. I finally spoke up, my voice steady. Jealous? Of what exactly? Of being Dad's puppet? Of having every decision made for you? You ungrateful little, Mom started, but I cut her off. I'm not the same person you could dismiss anymore. I stood, smoothing my black dress. Dad saw something in me at the end. Something you all missed. What did you do to him? Sergio demanded, getting in my face. How did you convince him to change the will? I met his gaze calmly. I showed him my potential, something you never had to do because it was always handed to you. Carson cleared his throat. There's more. Mr. Wilkinson left a letter explaining his decision. My heart skipped. This I hadn't known about. Carson began reading. To my family. I've watched for years as we destroyed Alice's spirit, dismissed her achievements, and pushed her into the background. In my final months, I saw what she's built on her own, without our help or acknowledgement. She has the vision and strength to take Wilkinson Industries where it needs to go. Sergio, you were given everything and did nothing with it. Alice made something from nothing. She deserves this. Tears pricked at my eyes, but I blinked them away. Too little, too late, Dad. This is ridiculous, Mom declared, standing. We'll fight this. Come, Sergio. They stormed out, leaving me alone with Carson. He gathered the papers, looking at me thoughtfully. They don't know, do they? He asked quietly. About your non-profit. I shook my head. They never bothered to ask what I was doing with my life. They're about to find out. My phone buzzed again. Luna. Meeting still on for tomorrow. The merger paperwork is ready. Yes, I replied. Time to show them exactly what the family disappointment can do. Walking out of the office, I felt lighter than I had in years. Dad's final gift wasn't just the inheritance. It was the look on Sergio's face when he realized he wasn't untouchable anymore. The way Mom's carefully constructed world crumbled around her. I stepped into the sunshine, remembering all the family dinners where I was invisible, the achievements that went unacknowledged, the constant comparison to Sergio. They never saw me coming. They never saw me at all. But they would now. My phone rang. Luna again. Well, she asked when I answered. Did the bomb drop? I laughed. really laughed, for the first time in days. Oh yes, and Luna? They have no idea what's coming next. That's my girl, she said. Ready to change the world? I got into my car, starting the engine. Ready to show them exactly who Alice Wilkinson is. The game was on, and for once I held all the cards. Let them contest the will. Let them fight. They were about to learn that the daughter they underestimated had become the woman they should have feared. You've been planning this for 3 years? Luna set down her coffee cup, eyes wide. We were sitting in our usual corner of the small cafe where everything had started. I knew you were working on something big, but this... 4 years, actually. I pulled out my laptop, showing her the spreadsheets and documents I'd carefully compiled. Remember that night you found me crying here? How could I forget? You looked like you'd hit rock bottom. The memory was still crystal clear. I'd just left another disastrous family dinner where Sergio had announced his latest promotion, and Mom had spent the entire evening gushing about how he was following in Dad's footsteps. What about your new project? I'd asked during dessert. The Women's Shelter Initiative. Oh, honey, Mom had dismissed with a wave. Leave the real business to your brother. I'd fled to this cafe, where Luna, a complete stranger then, had offered me a tissue and changed my life with 6 simple words. Why don't you prove them wrong? Look at this, I said now, turning the laptop toward her. The non-profit has already helped over 300 women start their own businesses. We're profitable, sustainable, and making real change. Luna scrolled through the figures, whistling low. And your family never knew? They never asked. I took a sip of my Americano. Dad found out, though, right at the end. That's when everything changed. My phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Sergio just showed up at the office, demanding to see the books. Right on schedule, I muttered, typing back. Follow the protocol we discussed. Luna raised an eyebrow. Your brother's making his move. He's predictable. Always has been. I closed my laptop. He thinks he'll find evidence that I manipulated Dad, but instead, he'll find a perfectly legitimate business that's more successful than anything he's ever done. Luna finished, grinning. My phone rang. Mom this time. I put it on speaker. Alice, this has gone far enough, she started without preamble. Your brother is devastated. How could you do this to your own family? I learned from the best, Mom. How many times did you and Dad devastate me? That's different. We were preparing you for the real world. No, I countered. You were breaking me down to keep me in my place. But guess what? I built myself back up. Your father wasn't thinking clearly when he changed that will. We both know. He was thinking clearly for the first time in his life, I cut in. He saw what I built while you were all too busy praising Sergio for existing. The line went quiet for a moment. What exactly did you build? I laughed bitterly. Now you want to know? After 4 years of not caring? Alice, check your email, Mom. I sent you everything 10 minutes ago. Maybe now you'll understand why Dad changed his mind. I hung up, hands shaking slightly. Luna reached across the table and squeezed my arm. You okay? Better than okay. I pulled up another document on my laptop. Watch this. Sergio should be discovering right about now that he can't access any of the company accounts. You already changed the permissions? Carson helped me file the paperwork the moment the will was read. Sergio's executive access has been officially revoked. My phone buzzed again. An angry text from Sergio. What the hell did you do? The board won't even take my calls. That's because I met with them last week, I told Luna, smirking. Showed them our plans for merging Wilkinson Industries with my non-profit. They were impressed. You brilliant, devious woman. Luna raised her coffee cup in a toast. To karma. To karma, I agreed, clinking my cup against hers. Another text from Margaret. Sergio just left. He looked ready to explode. Should I send you the security footage? Save it, I replied. Might need it for the court case. You really think they'll sue? I'm counting on it. I showed Luna another document, because when they do, this all comes out in discovery. Every dismissive comment, every time they undermined me, every opportunity they gave Sergio while telling me I wasn't good enough. and your non-profit's success proves them wrong on every count. Luna nodded. But Alice, are you ready for how ugly this could get? I thought about all the family dinners spent in silence, all the achievements ignored, all the times I was told to be more like my brother. They made it ugly years ago, Luna. I'm just finally fighting back. My phone lit up with another call. Carson this time. Alice, they've filed the lawsuit. Are you ready to proceed with Phase 2? I met Luna's eyes across the table, seeing the same fierce support that had sparked this journey 4 years ago. Yes, I said firmly. Let's show them exactly what the family disappointment can do. The game was moving faster now, pieces falling into place. They thought they knew what they were fighting for, but they had no idea what they were fighting against. It was time to show them the power of the daughter they'd underestimated. The courthouse steps felt like a stage, and my family had always loved putting on a show. Sergio stood with his attorney, playing the part of the wounded son perfectly for the gathering reporters. Mom hovered nearby, dabbing at non-existent tears with a monogrammed handkerchief. Ready? Carson asked, adjusting his tie as we approached. I was born ready, I replied, then paused as I spotted a familiar face in the crowd. Luna? She pushed through the reporters wearing a sharp business suit I'd never seen before. Surprise! Margaret sent me, said you might need moral support. Ms. Wilkinson, a reporter shoved a microphone in my face. How do you respond to allegations that you manipulated your father into changing his will? Before I could answer, Sergio stepped forward. My sister took advantage of our father's declining health. I built a successful business that helps women escape exactly the kind of toxic family dynamics I grew up with. I cut in, my voice clear and steady. Dad saw that success and made his own choice. The reporters' cameras clicked frantically as Sergio's face reddened. You've always been jealous. Jealous? I laughed, the sound echoing off the courthouse columns. Of what? Being handed everything while I had to fight for scraps? That's enough, Mom intervened, grabbing Sergio's arm. We're family. We shouldn't… Family? I turned to face her. Was it family when you told the board members I was emotionally unstable last week? The reporters went silent. Mom's face paled. Oh, yes, I continued, pulling out my phone. I have the email right here. Should I read it out loud? Alice, Carson warned quietly. You're right, I nodded, putting the phone away. Save it for the judge. We filed into the courtroom, the tension thick enough to cut. Luna squeezed my hand before taking a seat in the gallery. I sat beside Carson, watching Sergio whisper frantically with his attorney. All rise, the bailiff called as Judge Martinez entered. The preliminary hearing began with Sergio's attorney painting a picture of a manipulative sister taking advantage of a dying father. I kept my face neutral even as my fingers dug into my palms under the table. Then it was Carson's turn. Your Honor, he began, standing. I'd like to present evidence of Ms. Wilkinson's business acumen and success prior to her father's death. He projected my non-profit's financial statements onto the courtroom screen. In 4 years, my client built an organization that has helped hundreds of women achieve financial independence. An organization that, I might add, is more profitable than any project her brother has managed. Sergio's attorney jumped up. Objection. Relevance? The relevance, Carson continued smoothly, is that Mr. Wilkinson Sr. made a sound business decision based on demonstrated capability, not manipulation. The judge leaned forward, studying the figures. These are impressive numbers, Ms. Wilkinson. Thank you, Your Honor, I replied. We're particularly proud of our 92% success rate with small business startups. Success she kept hidden from her family, Sergio burst out. If she was so accomplished, why didn't she tell us? I did tell you, I said quietly, but my voice carried in the hushed courtroom. Every family dinner for 4 years. You were always too busy talking about yourself to listen. That's a lie. Actually, Carson interjected, we have video evidence from several family gatherings where Ms. Wilkinson attempted to discuss her work, only to be dismissed or interrupted. Mom's face went ashen. She remembered those dinners. She'd done most of the interrupting. Furthermore, Carson continued, we have documentation showing that Mr. Wilkinson Sr. spent his final months reviewing his daughter's business model and meeting with her team. His decision to change his will was made with full mental capacity and careful consideration. The judge nodded slowly. I've seen enough for today. Given the evidence presented, I'm denying the request for an emergency injunction. Ms. Wilkinson will retain control of the estate pending full trial. Sergio slumped in his chair. Mum's hands trembled as she clutched her purse. Outside the courthouse, Luna was waiting with a hug. You were amazing in there. It's not over, I reminded her, watching my family huddle with their attorney across the plaza. No, she agreed, but you drew first blood. My phone buzzed. Margaret again. Board meeting tomorrow. They want to fast-track the merger after seeing today's performance. I smiled, typing back, perfect. Send me the details. Alice! Mom's voice rang out. I turned to see her approaching alone, her perfect makeup slightly smudged. Please, can we talk? Now you want to talk? I asked, after trying to paint me as mentally unstable to the board. I was trying to protect our family. No, I cut her off. You were trying to protect your idea of family, the perfect son, the quiet daughter who knows her place. Well, guess what? That family doesn't exist anymore. I turned away, linking arms with Luna. Behind us, I heard Mom call out one more time, her voice breaking. What happened to my little girl? She grew up, I called back without turning around, and she learned how to fight back. The war wasn't over, but the first battle was mine, and I was just getting started. The merger paperwork is ready, Margaret announced, spreading documents across the conference room table. Once you sign these, Wilkinson Industries officially becomes part of Women's Rise Foundation. I picked up the pen, then paused. Any word from Sergio's camp? Your brother's been calling board members non-stop, Margaret smirked. But after yesterday's court performance, no one's taking his calls. Luna burst into the room waving her phone. You need to see this. Sergio just went on LinkedIn. She showed me the post. Deeply saddened by my sister's hostile takeover of our family business. This betrayal of our father's legacy will not stand. Hostile takeover? I laughed. I literally inherited it. The comments are the best part, Luna scrolled down. Look how many people are calling him out. My phone buzzed. Mom again. Her fifth call today. This time I answered. What do you want? Your brother is drinking again, she said without preamble. This is destroying him, Alice. Is that what you wanted? What I wanted was a family that valued me, I replied. What I wanted was recognition for my achievements. What I got was years of being told I wasn't good enough. We never... Save it for the trial, Mom. I hung up and turned to Margaret. Let's sign these papers. As I put pen to paper, the office door burst open. Sergio stumbled in, clearly drunk, his tie askew. You can't do this, he slurred. This is my birthright. Sir, you need to leave, Margaret started, reaching for the security button. No! He lurched forward, grabbing for the papers. I won't let you destroy everything Dad built. Security's on their way, Luna announced, phone in hand. I stood, facing my brother. Dad built this company by crushing everyone in his path. I'm transforming it into something that actually helps people. By helping what? Poor women start craft businesses? He sneered. That's your big vision. One of our clients just landed $1 million defense contract, Margaret interjected. Another's tech startup was valued at $12 million last quarter. This isn't about business, I said quietly. This is about you finally facing consequences. Security arrived, taking Sergio's arms. He struggled, shouting, You'll regret this. Mom and I will... Will what? I cut him off. Tell more lies. Try to paint me as unstable. That worked so well in court yesterday. As they dragged him out, his last words echoed, Dad would be ashamed of you. No, I called after him. Dad was finally proud of me. That's what's really killing you. Luna locked the door behind them. Well, that was dramatic. Get it on video? I asked Margaret. She held up her phone, grinning. Every second, including the part where he tried to physically stop a legal business transaction. I returned to the papers, signing the final page. Send copies to the board, our attorneys, and the court. And, Margaret, make sure that video gets to Judge Martinez. Already done. She gathered the documents. Congratulations, boss. You now officially run both companies. My phone chimed with a text from Carson. Sergio's attorney just withdrew from the case, cited irreconcilable differences with the client. They're unraveling, Luna observed, reading over my shoulder. Good. I sat back down, pulling up the company's financial projections. Now for phase 2. Margaret, how soon can we implement the new leadership structure? The board approved it this morning. We can announce the changes tomorrow. Perfect. I showed them the org chart on my screen. See these positions? All going to women who were told they weren't good enough, just like I was. Sergio's going to lose it when he sees this, Luna warned. Let him. Every tantrum, every drunk outburst, every angry social media post just proves I made the right choice. Margaret's tablet pinged. Speaking of social media, your mother just posted something interesting. She showed us the post. Sometimes the hardest thing is admitting you were wrong. Watching my daughter succeed despite our lack of support has opened my eyes. Sergio, it's time to let go. Don't trust it, Luna said immediately. It's a trap. Of course it is, I agreed. But it's also the first crack in her armor. She's realizing which way the wind is blowing. My phone buzzed again. An email from the board chairman. Impressive work today. Your father would be proud. Dinner next week to discuss international expansion. I showed it to Luna, who squeezed my shoulder. Look at you, changing the world. Not changing it, I corrected. Balancing it. One underestimated woman at a time. Margaret gathered her things. Board announcement goes out at 9 tomorrow. Want me to send security to your place tonight? Sergio might try something else. I shook my head. Let him try. Every mistake he makes just strengthens our position. As they left, I stood at my office window, watching the city lights come on. Somewhere out there, Sergio was probably drinking himself into a stupor, and Mom was realizing her perfect world was crumbling. But me? I was just getting started. The knock on my office door came just after sunset. I looked up to find Mom standing there, looking smaller than I remembered, her designer outfit slightly wrinkled. Security let you up? I asked, not moving from my desk. I told them I was your mother. She stepped inside, clutching her purse like a shield. They called Luna. She said it was okay. My phone buzzed. Luna's text read, She's alone. Sergio's in rehab. Your call if you want to hear her out. What do you want, Mom? She sat down heavily in the visitor's chair. I visited your women's shelter yesterday. That got my attention. Why? I wanted to understand. She pulled out a tissue, dabbing at her eyes. I met this woman there, Sarah. She told me how your program helped her leave her abusive husband, start a business, and she reminded me of myself 30 years ago. Mom's hands trembled. Before I met your father. I leaned back, studying her face. Are you saying, your father wasn't always... She paused. I gave up my own dreams to support his. Then I pushed Sergio to follow in his footsteps, and you to stay quiet, because that's what I thought we were supposed to do. Why are you telling me this now? Because you broke the cycle. She met my eyes. You did what I never could. My phone buzzed again. Margaret. Sergio's attorney filed for a continuance, claims rehab as the reason. Is he really in rehab? I asked Mom. She nodded. 3 days now, after he tried to break into your house last week. That was him? I'd assumed the attempted break-in was random. He was drunk. Again. I finally called an intervention service. She pulled out her phone, showing me photos of Sergio checking into a facility. He needs help, Alice, real help. And you think that excuses everything he's done? No. She straightened in her chair. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because I saw what you've built. Those women at the shelter, the businesses you've helped launch, you're doing something remarkable. Something you and Dad always said I couldn't do. We were wrong. The words hung in the air between us. I was wrong. My phone lit up. Luna again. You okay? Need backup? I'm fine, I typed back, then looked at Mom. What exactly do you want from me? Nothing. She stood, smoothing her skirt. I just wanted you to know that I see you now. And her voice cracked. I'm proud of you. The words I'd waited decades to hear felt hollow now. That's not enough, I said quietly. You can't just walk in here, say you're proud, and expect everything to be fixed. I know. She moved toward the door, then paused. But maybe it's a start. Before I could respond, Margaret burst in. Alice, we have a situation. Sergio's attorney just leaked documents to the press. What documents? Margaret handed me her tablet. Old psychological evaluations, from when you were a teenager. I scanned the headlines. Troubled teen to corporate takeover, the mental health history behind the Wilkinson family drama. Those were private, Mom exclaimed. How did they get them? You mean the records you kept in your home office? I looked up at her. The ones you showed the board last month? She paled. Alice, Save it. I turned to Margaret. Call Carson. Get our response ready. And contact every woman we've helped who's willing to speak to the press about their own mental health struggles and successes. Already on it, Margaret nodded. Luna's organising a press conference for tomorrow. Good. I faced Mom again. You should go. Let me help, she pleaded. I can make a statement, tell them I was wrong. Like you just told me? I shook my head. Too little. Too late, Mom. Way too late. After she left, I called Luna. You were right. It was a trap. Actually, Luna said slowly, I don't think it was. I think she really meant it. She just didn't know Sergio's attorney would do this. Doesn't matter. I pulled up the leaked documents on my screen. They want to talk about mental health. Let's talk about it. Let's show the world how many successful women have faced these struggles. Turn their weapon against them. Exactly. I started typing an email to our PR team. They thought these records would shame me? Watch me use them to inspire every woman who's ever been called unstable for standing up for herself. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Sergio. Hope you're ready for everyone to know how crazy you really are. I smiled, typing back, Oh, brother, you have no idea what crazy can do. The game had changed, but the outcome wouldn't. They thought they could shame me with my past. I'd use it to fuel my future and help countless other women do the same. Let the real battle begin. The courtroom buzzed with energy as I took my seat. Behind me, dozens of women from our foundation filled the gallery, each wearing a purple ribbon, our symbol of resilience. Quite a turnout, Carson whispered, arranging his papers. They're not just here for me, I replied, nodding toward the press section where reporters frantically typed on laptops. They're here to change the narrative. Sergio entered with his new attorney, looking haggard despite his expensive suit. 30 days of rehab had left him thinner, more subdued. Mom slipped in behind them, choosing a seat halfway between us. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Martinez studied the packed courtroom before speaking. Given recent developments and media attention, I want to be clear. This is not a trial about mental health. This is about the validity of a will. Proceed. Sergio's attorney stood first. Your Honour, we intend to prove that Alice Wilkinson was mentally unfit to influence her father's decisions during his final months. Objection, Carson called. Counsel is attempting to stigmatise mental health struggles despite Miss Wilkinson's documented recovery and success. Sustained. Judge Martinez nodded. Counsel, proceed carefully. The attorney called his first witness. My old therapist, Dr. Roberts. Dr. Roberts, the attorney began, you treated Ms. Wilkinson for depression and anxiety in her teens, correct? I did, she replied calmly. And would you say she was unstable? Objection. Carson stood. Medical privacy. Your Honour, I interrupted, standing. I waive privacy concerns. Let her answer. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Dr. Roberts smiled slightly. Alice was a teenager struggling with an emotionally abusive family dynamic. Her responses were entirely normal given the circumstances. Normal, the attorney scoffed. She accused her family of favoritism, of undermining her. All of which has been proven true, Dr. Roberts cut in. In fact, I'm here voluntarily to support Alice. Her recovery and success are exactly what mental health professionals hope for. In the gallery, several women stood up, revealing their own purple ribbons. The message was clear. We've all been here. The attorney shifted tactics, calling Mum to the stand. Mrs. Wilkinson, describe your daughter's behaviour in the months before your husband's death. Mum gripped the witness stand, looking first at Sergio, then at me. She was different. Different how? Stronger, Mum said quietly. More confident. She stopped letting us interrupt her at family dinners. Started standing up for herself. Would you call that stable behaviour given her history? Mum straightened her spine. I would call that healthy behaviour given our history, the attorney stumbled. Mrs. Wilkinson, I'm supposed to tell the truth, Mom interrupted. The truth is, we're here because we couldn't handle seeing Alice succeed on her own terms. Sergio jumped up. Mom, what are you doing? Enough, she snapped. Look at yourself, Sergio. Look what fighting this has done to you. To us. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Judge Martinez banged her gavel. Order. Mrs. Wilkinson. Continue. Mum turned to the judge. My husband changed his will because he finally saw what we'd done to our daughter. What I'd done. And he saw how she'd succeeded despite us. Your Honour, Sergio's attorney sputtered. I move to strike. Denied, Judge Martinez said. Continue, Mrs. Wilkinson. The night before he died, Mom's voice cracked, Wilson told me he was proud of Alice, that she had more business sense than any of us. I was too stubborn to listen then. I'm listening now. She turned to me, tears streaming. I'm so sorry, Alice, for everything. The gallery burst into applause. The judge banged her gavel again, but she was smiling. Given this testimony and the evidence presented, I'm prepared to rule, Judge Martinez announced. Unless the plaintiffs wish to withdraw their challenge. Sergio's attorney leaned in to whisper to him. After a moment, Sergio slumped in his chair. We withdraw the challenge, Your Honour. Very well. The judge looked at me. Ms. Wilkinson, the will stands. But more importantly, you've turned this case into something meaningful. Your foundation's mental health advocacy during this trial has been remarkable. As the courtroom cleared, Luna rushed forward to hug me. Behind her, women from the foundation gathered, many crying, all smiling. Mom approached hesitantly. Alice, that press conference you're planning tomorrow. Could I speak? Tell my story? Maybe help other mothers avoid my mistakes? I studied her face, seeing real remorse for the first time. I'll have Margaret call you. Thank you. She turned to leave, then paused. You know, your father was right. You did have more business sense than any of us. You just had more humanity too. As she left, Luna squeezed my arm. You did it. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected, looking at the women around us. All of us. My phone buzzed. Margaret. CNN wants an interview. Time to tell your story. I smiled, typing back. No, time to tell our story. All of our stories. The war was over. Now the real work could begin. 3, 2, 1. The producer pointed at me as the red light blinked on. Welcome back to Morning America, the host smiled warmly. We're here with Alice, CEO of Women's Rise Foundation, and her mother Gwendolyn, sharing their story of family healing and female empowerment. The studio lights felt hot, but I stayed cool. 6 months after the trial, here we were, Mom and I, doing something I never thought possible. Working together. Alice, your foundation has helped over 1,000 women since the merger, the host continued. What's been the most rewarding part? Watching women discover their worth, I replied. Every time someone realizes they're capable of more than what they've been told, it heals a piece of my own past. Gwendolyn, as someone who initially opposed your daughter's work, What changed your mind? Mom straightened in her chair. I saw myself in the women she helps. I was that scared young woman once, giving up her dreams because I thought that's what women should do. And now you're running the Foundation's mentorship program? Alice gave me a chance to make amends, Mom said, her voice steady. Not just with her, but with every woman I might have discouraged over the years. My phone vibrated in my pocket, probably Luna, watching from the office. The interview continued as planned until the host dropped an unexpected bomb. Your brother Sergio recently announced his own non-profit. Any comments? I kept my face neutral. Yes, he's starting a rehabilitation program for executives dealing with addiction and mental health issues. We're actually collaborating on some initiatives. The host leaned forward. After everything that happened, you're working together? Family is complicated, I said carefully, but healing is possible when people are willing to change. After the interview, Mom and I headed to the Foundation's new headquarters, the renovated Wilkinson Industries building. You handled that question about Sergio perfectly, she said as we rode the elevator. Well, he's actually doing good work now. Who knew hitting rock bottom would be the best thing for him? The elevator opened to reveal Luna waiting with champagne. You both killed it. The social media response is insane. Show me, I said, following her to the conference room where Margaret had set up a viewing party for the staff. Look at these comments, Luna scrolled through her tablet. Finally, a real story about women supporting women. Watching Alice and her mom heal their relationship gives me hope. This foundation saved my life. Speaking of saving lives, Margaret interrupted, entering with a stack of papers. The new domestic violence shelter proposal is ready for review, and Sergio's rehab centre wants to partner on the mental health initiative. Mom touched my arm gently. I can handle the shelter proposal if you want to focus on the partnership with your brother. Look at you, being all executive, I teased. I learned from the best. She smiled, then grew serious. Alice, about the family beach house. What about it? I think we should turn it into a retreat centre for the foundation, a place where women can go to heal, plan their futures. Mom. I stared at her. The beach house had been her pride and joy, her status symbol. It's time, she said firmly. Those women need it more than I need to impress the country club set. Luna wiped away a tear. Okay, who are you? And what have you done with the real Gwendolyn? We all laughed, but Mom's eyes were serious. The real Gwendolyn was lost for a long time. Alice helped me find her again. My phone buzzed. Sergio this time. Saw the interview. You didn't have to mention my non-profit, but thanks. Lunch next week to discuss the partnership? Progress, Luna commented, reading over my shoulder. Baby steps, I agreed, typing back. Lunch works. Bring your proposal. Margaret cleared her throat. Not to interrupt the family healing, but we have that board meeting in 10 minutes. The international expansion plan. Right. I gathered my things, then turned to Mom. Coming. She blinked. You want me in the board meeting? You're running 2 of our biggest initiatives now. Of course I want you there. As we walked to the boardroom, Luna fell in step beside me. Remember that night in the cafe, when you were crying about your family never seeing you? Hard to forget. Look at you now. They don't just see you, they're following your lead. I watched Mom ahead of us, already discussing the shelter proposal with Margaret. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making people pay for their mistakes. It's showing them a better way, Luna finished. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from Sarah, one of our first success stories. Just landed my first $1 million contract. Thank you for showing me what was possible. I smiled, remembering all the times I'd been told what wasn't possible. Now here we were, redefining possible every day. Ready? Mom held the boardroom door open. Ready, I nodded, stepping into the next chapter of our story, not just mine anymore, but ours. All of ours. The autumn breeze carried the scent of coffee from the little cafe where everything had started. Luna sat across from me at our usual table just like that first night, but everything else had changed. Full circle, she said, sliding a newspaper across the table. "Have you seen this?" I glanced at the headline. "Women's Rise Foundation named Most Influential Non-Profit of the Year." "Margaret's already framed 3 copies." I laughed. "But that's not why I asked you here." "Oh?" Luna raised an eyebrow. I pulled out a folder. "Remember how you found me crying here, told me to prove them wrong?" Best advice I ever gave. "Well, I want to prove something else now." I opened the folder, revealing partnership papers. "How would you like to be CEO?" Luna choked on her coffee. "What?" "I'm stepping down," I said. "The foundation needs someone focused on growth. I need to focus on something else." "Alice, this is your baby. You built this." "We built this," I corrected. "You, me, Margaret, all the women we've helped, and now I want to build something new." I showed her another document. Plans for a political action committee focused on women's economic rights. "Holy shit," Luna whispered, scanning the details. "This is huge." "Bigger than us?" I nodded. "But first, I need to do something else. Come with me?" We drove to the cemetery where Mom and Sergio were already waiting by Dad's grave. It was the first time we'd all been here together since the funeral. "You sure about this?" Sergio asked as I placed a folder on Dad's headstone. "He should see it," I replied. "The final numbers." Mom opened the folder, revealing the foundation's annual report. 10,000 women helped, 48 million in grants distributed, 300 new businesses launched. "And 1 family rebuilt," Sergio added quietly. I turned to him. "How's the rehab center doing?" 28 executives graduated from the program last month. Turns out there are a lot of people struggling under the weight of expectations. "Speaking of expectations," Mom interjected, "have you told Luna your other news?" Luna looked between us. "What other news?" I pulled out one final document. "Remember that woman we helped last year? The one who designed the solar-powered water filtration system? The one nobody would fund because she was too young and female? Yeah, why? We just bought her company. All the patents, all the technology. She's going to help us bring clean water to communities around the world." "Under the foundation?" Luna asked. "Under you," I corrected, "if you accept the CEO position." Sergio cleared his throat. "And I've got some contacts in developing markets who could use this technology. If you're interested in a partnership." "Look at you, being all collaborative," I teased. "Yeah, well," he shrugged. "Turns out helping people feels better than fighting them." Mom wiped away a tear. "Your father would be so proud, not just of the success, but of how you've all grown. Even you, Mom," I said softly. "The shelter program you're running has saved hundreds of lives." "Because you showed me it was possible," she replied. "You showed all of us." Luna cleared her throat. "So about this CEO position?" "Say yes," Sergio urged. "Alice needs to focus on getting into politics. Someone has to change the laws that keep women down." "And that someone is my daughter," Mom said proudly. I placed my hand on Dad's headstone. "I used to think revenge meant making you all pay for how you treated me. But real revenge was showing you a better way, making you part of something bigger than yourselves." "Karma works in mysterious ways," Luna agreed, then straightened her shoulders. "All right, I accept. But on one condition. Name it. We turn this cafe into our first international headquarters. Where it all began," I laughed. "Already done. Bought it last week." Mom linked her arm through mine as we walked back to our cars. "You know, for someone who started out wanting revenge, you've created something remarkable." "We all did," I corrected. "Even Dad in his own way. His last decision gave me the power to change things." "And now?" Sergio asked. I looked at Luna, already on her phone planning the foundation's next phase. At Mom, who'd found her voice helping other women find theirs. At Sergio, using his experience to help others heal. Now we keep going, keep building, keep proving that the best revenge isn't about destroying people. It's about transforming them, Luna finished. My phone buzzed. "Margaret. Conference call with the UN in 10 minutes. Ready to change the world?" I smiled, typing back. "Already did. Now let's do it again." Standing there with my once broken family, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of possibility, I finally understood. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the battle. It's in changing the game entirely.
My earliest memories are snapshots tinged with a melancholic blue. Dad, a figure in a faded photograph tucked away in a dusty album, left before I turned 5. Mom, Anna, became a storm cloud hovering over our tiny apartment. One moment, she'd be frantically scrubbing the kitchen floor, muttering about starting fresh. The next, she'd scoop me into a crushing hug, her grip so tight it left me breathless. These suffocating embraces, though infrequent, were the only displays of affection I craved. Mostly, I was a small shadow trailing behind her. She'd flit about the apartment, her face etched with a worry that seemed to have a life of its own. Sometimes, when the worry lines deepened and her brow furrowed, she'd leave me with Mrs. Rodriguez downstairs. When Mom finally returned, the tension would crackle in the air like static electricity. She'd ruffle my hair with a distracted sigh, a gesture that felt more obligatory than loving. Then, a fleeting smile would flicker across her face, a glimpse of the warmth I desperately craved. Mom started dating again. Alex, a man with eyes that crinkled at the corners when he laughed, entered our lives. Unlike the whirlwind that was Mom, he moved with a gentle calm. He treated me with a kindness that felt foreign in our tense household. One day, after a particularly humiliating incident with Jessica Miller and her posse at school, I found myself clinging to him on the couch, tears blurring my vision. "Why do they always pick on me?" I mumbled into his shirt, the familiar ache of loneliness constricting my chest. He knelt before me, his eyes reflecting a concern I wasn't used to seeing from adults. "They pick on you because they're insecure," he said softly, wiping away a stray tear. "They want to feel powerful by making others feel small." His words were a balm to my wounded spirit. In that moment, a flicker of hope ignited within me. Maybe, just maybe, things were starting to look up. But hope, in my world, was a fragile butterfly, easily crushed. Then came Lily. A tiny bundle of joy with eyes that mirrored Mom's. She arrived a year later. Suddenly, I wasn't the center of attention anymore. All the warmth, all the affection, seemed to evaporate, replaced by a cold indifference. Mom's focus shifted entirely to Lily, leaving me to navigate the confusing world of childhood alone. 14. Awkward braces, a permanent frizz halo around my head, and a knot of insecurity the size of Texas tightening in my gut. It was also the age when my mom's negativity towards me bloomed into a full-blown weed garden. Take picture day at school. Mom took the day off work to fuss over Lily's pigtails and pick out the perfect sparkly dress. When it came to my turn, a sigh escaped her lips as she rummaged through my closet. "Ugh, nothing decent in here," she muttered. Of course, when picture day arrived, Lily looked like a little princess, and I resembled a rumpled dandelion compared to her sunflower. Mom cooed over Lily's photo, while mine got a cursory glance and a dismissive grunt. Alex, bless his kind heart, tried to be the positive voice in my life. He'd take me shopping sometimes, helping me pick out clothes that actually fit and flattered me. One day, after a particularly frustrating day with Mom, I found myself clinging to him, the need for comfort overwhelming. "Dad," the word slipped out before I could stop it. He froze, then a pained expression crossed his face. Mom appeared in the doorway, her eyes blazing. "You have one father, Elena," she hissed, her voice laced with venom. "And trust me, he deserves you." Her words stung like a slap. Alex, sensing the tension, ruffled my hair awkwardly. "Look, it's okay," he mumbled. "It's not okay," I choked out, tears welling up in my eyes. Lily, who had been watching the whole scene unfold with a smug expression, suddenly piped up. "Elena's been bad again, Daddy. She took my candy without asking." 16. The land of first crushes, awkward dances, and a constant knot of nerves in my stomach. Dating, however, was a minefield in my house. Mom had a knack for sabotaging any potential romance before it even sprouted legs. Take Mark, for example. Tall, funny, and with a smile that could melt glaciers, he was everything a teenage girl could dream of. After weeks of nervous texts and stolen glances, I finally gathered the courage to ask him out. He said yes. Excitement bubbled in my chest, a feeling quickly replaced with dread at the thought of him meeting Mom. The night of our date, Mom went into overdrive. She fussed over Lily's bedtime story, making sure it stretched on for an eternity. When Mark finally arrived, looking nervous but sweet, Mom greeted him with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Elena never cleans her room," she announced casually, as if discussing the weather. "You might find socks and pizza boxes under that mountain of clothes." My cheeks burned like they were on fire. Mark gave a nervous chuckle, but the awkward silence stretched like a bad joke. The rest of the evening was a disaster. Mom kept making snide remarks about my weight, my taste in music, even my choice of college. By the end of the night, Mark practically ran out the door, leaving me feeling like a deflated balloon. The story repeated itself with a few unfortunate guys after that. Each time I brought someone home, Mom would turn into a master of backhanded compliments and subtle digs. My self-confidence took a nosedive, and any potential relationship fizzled out faster than a wet firecracker. 18. The age of college applications, nervous goodbyes, and a fierce determination to break free from the suffocating grip of my childhood. Senior year became my mission control, a strategic plan to launch myself into a world where Mom's negativity couldn't reach me. College applications became my weapon of choice. I spent hours hunched over the kitchen table, pouring my heart and dreams onto those pristine white pages. Every acceptance letter was a victory, a tiny shard of hope chipping away at the wall Mom had built around me. Of course, she didn't make it easy. When I announced my acceptance to a university across the state, her reaction was a masterpiece of passive aggression. "Oh, Elena," she sighed, shaking her head. "So far away. How will we ever see each other?" It was a question loaded with guilt, but I wasn't falling for it anymore. "We can video chat, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "Besides, there are these things called airplanes." Alex, my ever-supportive anchor, was thrilled for me. "This is amazing, Elena," he beamed, pulling me into a tight hug. "I'm so proud of you." His words were a warm hug on a cold day. He may not have been my dad by blood, but he felt more like one than the man who walked out on us all those years ago. College was a revelation. Surrounded by people who didn't know my family history, I finally felt like I could breathe. I blossomed in a sea of new experiences, challenging myself academically and forging friendships that felt genuine and supportive. 27. The land of adulting, spreadsheets that never seemed to end, and a tiny apartment that felt like a palace compared to my cramped childhood bedroom. Life, for the most part, was good. My job as an economist kept my brain buzzing, and David, my amazing boyfriend for the past few years, brought a warmth and laughter into my life I hadn't known before. One evening, over takeout Thai food and a bottle of wine, David dropped a bombshell. "So," he said, looking at me with that goofy grin I adored, "I think it's time we met each other's parents." My stomach lurched. Meeting David's folks was easy, a breeze, even. They lived in a cozy house with a backyard that smelled like freshly cut grass, and they welcomed me with open arms. His mom, Sarah, practically smothered me in hugs, and his dad, Michael, spent the entire evening cracking jokes that had me snorting into my napkin. They were warm, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. It felt normal, a word I never dared associate with family dinners in my past life. But the thought of David meeting my, well, interesting family filled me with dread. How could I explain the years of emotional neglect, the constant jabs, the suffocating negativity? I told him everything, the fights, the tears, the way Mom had chipped away at my self-esteem for years. Lily, unsurprisingly, hadn't gotten any better, now a master manipulator who knew exactly how to push my buttons. David listened patiently, his hand resting gently on mine. "Elena," he said firmly, "I'm marrying you, not your family. They may be baggage, but you're the prize." His words were a balm to my soul, a declaration of love that washed away years of doubt. Maybe, just maybe, I could finally build a happy family of my own, one filled with love, acceptance, and laughter, the kind of family I never had, but the kind I always deserved. My stomach twisted tighter than a pretzel as I dialed Alex's number. This was it. D-Day for breaking the news about David and the engagement. "Hey, Elena. What's up?" Alex's familiar voice boomed through the phone. "Hey, Alex," I said, taking a deep breath. "There's something I need to tell you." I launched into the story, spilling the beans about David, the proposal, and the upcoming wedding. There was a comfortable silence on the other end of the line, then a genuine laugh erupted. "Elena, that's fantastic. I'm so happy for you both." His words washed over me like a warm wave, easing some of the anxiety knotting my insides. "Listen," he continued. "You gotta bring him over for dinner. Let me meet the guy who finally snagged you." David, bless his supportive heart, was all for it. So, a few weeks later, we found ourselves pulling up to my childhood home, a place that still held a strange mix of nostalgia and dread. Mom answered the door, her face breaking into a surprised smile. "Elena, you came to visit? And who is this handsome fella?" "Mom, this is David, my fiancé," I said, offering a tight smile. David stepped forward, extending a hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Turner." Mom beamed, shaking his hand a little too enthusiastically. "The pleasure's all mine, dear." "So, David, what do you do for a living?" David, oblivious to the undercurrent of Mom's question, launched into a detailed explanation of his work as a director at a large company. Alex, ever the smooth operator, chimed in with jokes and stories, keeping the conversation flowing. Lily, of course, wasn't about to be outdone. She spent the entire meal batting her eyelashes at David, interrupting our conversations to pepper him with inane questions about his job and hobbies. Mom, ever the doting mother, fawned over Lily's every word, a stark contrast to the thinly veiled barbs she kept throwing my way. "Elena, honey," she'd say, her voice dripping with fake sweetness, "you really should take some fashion tips from Lily. That dress you're wearing, well, it's not exactly flattering." David, thankfully, seemed oblivious to the digs. But I knew exactly what Mom was doing. She was subtly putting me down, making me feel insecure right in front of my fiancé. The entire dinner felt like a twisted performance, a play where I was constantly reminded of how I wasn't good enough, not pretty enough, not successful enough. By the time dessert rolled around, I was ready to run screaming. As soon as it was polite, we made our excuses and left. The moment we were safely buckled into the car, David let out a long sigh. "Your mom, she's a character, isn't she?" he said, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Yeah," I muttered, a wave of exhaustion washing over me. "She can be." He squeezed my hand gently. "But hey, we made it through dinner, right?" He was right. We had. And even with Mom's negativity hanging in the air like a bad smell, the simple act of holding David's hand filled me with a sense of strength and purpose. This was my future, a future I was building with him, not with my dysfunctional family. The warm glow of post-dinner satisfaction lingered in the air as David and I curled up on the couch, poring over wedding magazines. We envisioned a small, intimate ceremony in a charming vineyard, surrounded by the people who loved and supported us. It was perfect. Then, the next morning, the dream shattered into a million pieces. My phone buzzed with David's name, his usual cheerful ringtone replaced by a ringing that sent a shiver down my spine. "Elena," he said, his voice tight with a mix of anger and disbelief. "We have a problem." My stomach lurched. "What's wrong?" He took a deep breath. "Your mom." The blood drained from my face. "What did she do this time?" David explained, his words hitting me like punches. Mom, the ever-reliable manipulator, had somehow unearthed his work phone number. And instead of a congratulatory call, she'd unleashed a verbal tirade that would make a sailor blush. Apparently, in her twisted world, I was the epitome of inadequacy, ugly, dull, and lacking any social graces. It didn't stop there. She'd even dragged Dad into it, dredging up his abandonment years ago like a weapon. But the piece de resistance? She'd suggested David ditch me and turn his sights on Lily, claiming my younger sister was the epitome of beauty and brains. Fury boiled up inside me, a hot, venomous rage. How dare she? How dare she try to sabotage my happiness yet again? David, bless his heart, was furious too. But he channeled his anger into something unexpected, a plan. A crazy, audacious plan that was equal parts risky and thrilling. We expose her, he said, his jaw clenched. We set a trap. The plan was audacious in its simplicity. David would call Mom back, pretend to be swayed by her words, and arrange a meeting to discuss this ludicrous proposal. His goal is to record this entire conversation on his phone. David made the call, his voice smooth and convincing. Mom, completely oblivious to the web she was about to walk into, readily agreed to meet him for coffee. A nervous laugh bubbled up from my chest. This was it. Operation Momzilla Takedown was a go. The outcome was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I wasn't going to let my mother dictate my future any longer. This time, the tables were turning, and I was ready to play for keeps. I decided to attend their meeting. The thought of confronting Mom, especially disguised as a stranger, sent shivers down my spine. But the anger simmering inside me, the anger at her constant negativity and her attempt to sabotage my happiness, was a powerful motivator. Back in my comfy jeans and a worn-out t-shirt, I slipped into a corner booth at a bustling cafe across the street from our designated meeting spot. Thick black glasses perched on my nose completed the disguise, transforming me into a nondescript observer. Butterflies danced a frenetic jig in my stomach as I watched Mom sashay into the cafe, a triumphant smile plastered on her face. She spotted David at the prearranged table in a private room, her smile widening further. This was it. Operation Momzilla Takedown was officially underway. David, bless his tech-savvy heart, had discreetly turned on the dictaphone on his phone. Me? Well, I heard their entire conversation in the immediate vicinity. Their conversation started innocently enough, David playing the part of the interested suitor. Then, Mom, completely ignoring his phone, launched into her diatribe. You know, David, she began, leaning in conspiratorially. Between you and me, Elena just isn't wife material. My blood ran cold. The woman who was supposed to be my mother, the woman who was supposed to love and support me, was bad-mouthing me to a complete stranger. She's, well, a bit simple, Mom continued, her voice laced with fake sympathy. Not very pretty either, if you know what I mean. David, to his credit, kept his face impassive, simply nodding along and murmuring noncommittal phrases. Inside, I knew he must be fuming. But Lily, Mom's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. Now that's a girl with potential. Smart, beautiful, knows how to handle herself in society. The audacity of it all. Lily, with her airhead personality and complete lack of work ethic, was apparently the epitome of elegance and intelligence according to Mom. The conversation continued, a masterclass in manipulation and deceit. Mom, blinded by her own delusions, even confessed to never loving my stepfather, claiming she'd only married him for his money. The woman had no shame. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mom stood up, her face radiating self-satisfaction. Well, David, it was lovely meeting you. Think about what I said, she purred, patting his hand with a perfectly manicured nail. As she walked out of the cafe, I could only shake my head in disbelief. So, what now? I asked, my voice tight. David pulled me into a hug, his touch a source of comfort amidst the swirling storm of emotions. Now, he said, his voice firm, we expose her. The air crackled with tension as I walked into my childhood home that weekend. Mom's smile was a mile wide, radiating a smugness that set my teeth on edge. Elena, honey, you won't believe it, she gushed, the words tumbling out before I even had a chance to say hello. What's that, Mom? I asked, already bracing myself for a bombshell. David, she declared, her voice dripping with a sickening satisfaction. Decided to see reason. He's leaving you and marrying Lily. My heart did a little stutter, but I forced a smile. That's great, Mom. Really happy for them. My stepdad, bless his perpetually confused soul, cleared his throat. Leaving her? But I thought they were getting married? Lily, who had been lounging on the couch like a pampered cat, snorted a laugh. Apparently not, Dad. Elena just wasn't good enough for him, shocker. I ignored her snide remark, my eyes locked on Mom's triumphant face. It was showtime. Actually, Mom, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. David's right here. Just then, David walked in, a sly grin plastered on his face. His presence sent a collective gasp echoing through the room. Hi everyone, he said, his voice mild. Just in time for a little family fun. He pulled out his phone and pressed play. The room fell silent as Mom's voice, dripping with malice, filled the air. The conversation from the cafe played in its entirety, her diatribe about me, her praise for Lily, the shocking confession about my stepfather. The color drained from Mom's face with each passing sentence. Stepdad turned a shade of puce, his jaw slack with disbelief. As for Lily, her bravado crumbled, replaced by a terrified whimper. When the recording ended, a deathly silence descended upon the room. Then, my stepfather exploded. You lying, snake! He roared, his voice shaking with fury. You married me for money? All these years? Mom, for the first time in my life, looked genuinely lost. Tears welled up in her eyes, but they were overshadowed by the storm brewing in my stepfather's face. I want a divorce, he declared, his voice thick with anger. Get a lawyer. The room imploded. Mom and Lily burst into tears, their wails a cacophony of misery and self-pity. David, bless his heart, looked as comfortable as a fish out of water, caught in a hurricane. Amidst the chaos, I felt a strange sense of calm. The truth, ugly and raw, was finally out in the open. The years of unspoken hurt, the manipulation, the lies, it all spilled out, shattering the facade of our dysfunctional family. The following weeks were a blur of legalese, choked sobs from a stepdad, and icy stares from Lily whenever our paths crossed at the grocery store. Mom, the architect of this whole mess, retreated into a self-imposed social media blackout. As for me, I felt strangely hollow. The anger that had fueled me for so long was gone, leaving a gaping hole that needed filling. One sunny afternoon, David found me curled up on the couch, mindlessly flipping through wedding magazines that now seemed like dusty relics from a bygone era. Hey, he said, his voice laced with concern. You all right? I managed a weak smile. Yeah, just thinking. Everything just feels so different. He squeezed onto the couch beside me, pulling me into a hug. It is, he admitted. But hey, different can be good. A chance to start fresh, you know? His words were a gentle nudge in the right direction. Maybe he was right. Maybe the mom-shaped void in my life could be filled with something new, something exciting. A spark ignited in my chest. So, I said, a mischievous glint in my eyes. What do you say we do something crazy? David's eyebrows shot up. Crazy? Like what? How about a road trip? I suggested, a grin spreading across my face. Just us, a map, and the open road. No expectations, no timelines, just pure adventure. You had me at road trip, he declared. And so, our plans took a sharp turn. The meticulously planned vineyard ceremony morphed into a spontaneous cross-country adventure. We packed a beat-up camper van with essentials, copious snacks, a killer playlist, and a well-worn copy of On the Road, and hit the road with no destination in mind, only the promise of new experiences and shared memories. Fast forward a year, and David and I were standing at the altar, exchanging vows under a canopy of fragrant flowers. It wasn't the elaborate ceremony I'd once envisioned, but it was perfect. Instead of a disapproving mother, my stepdad, recently divorced and estranged from Lily, walked me down the aisle. The tears in his eyes were a mixture of pride and regret, and as he squeezed my hand, he muttered, "You know, kiddo, I always knew you'd find your happily ever after." Life after the wedding settled into a comfortable rhythm. David and I built a life together, filled with laughter, love, and the occasional road trip adventure. My stepdad became a regular visitor, regaling us with stories from his travels and dropping not-so-subtle hints about wanting to be a grandpa. With a laugh, I'd reply, "Don't worry, you'll be the best grandpa ever." At 27, my life took a wild turn. My dad, who had bailed on us years ago after cheating on Mom, kicked the bucket and left me everything he had. It was a weird mix of feelings. I was sad about losing him, but let's be honest, we weren't close. And then, there was this whole becoming rich overnight thing. I inherited a bunch of shares in a famous company. It was like out of nowhere, I could actually think about doing anything I wanted. Mom was on edge about it though. One evening, as we sat in our old kitchen, she said, "Be careful, Olivia. Now that you're loaded, you'll see how many leeches come sniffing around." I just laughed it off. "Mom, come on. I can handle a few gold diggers." Then I met Mark. He was just a regular clerk at the property agency, where I was trying to untangle the mess of inheriting Dad's estate. The place was always packed, but Mark stood out with his straightforward charm and an easy smile that seemed to simplify everything. "Looks like you've got quite the stack there. Need a hand?" he offered, pointing at my pile of papers. "Would love some help, thanks. Feels like I'm drowning in paperwork," I admitted. As he sifted through the forms, he kept the conversation light. "So, inheriting a fortune, huh? Bet that's a lot to take in." "You have no idea. It's a lot all at once," I said, feeling a bit more at ease. We ended up chatting more each time I was there. It wasn't just about the will or the shares, we connected over simple things, like our favorite movies and where we liked to hang out on weekends. He was easygoing and had this knack for making me laugh when I least expected it. After a few weeks, he asked me out. Just casual drinks at a dive bar we both liked. "So, how about we take this discussion outside of these boring walls? Grab a beer with me?" he suggested with a grin. I agreed without hesitation. It felt right. Our dates turned into something more serious pretty quickly, and before I knew it, we were talking about a future together. One lazy evening, while we were sharing a pizza at my place, he turned to me and said, "Liv, I've been thinking. Why don't we make this official? Marry me?" His proposal was just like him, no dramatics, just straight to the point. I almost choked on my slice from laughing so hard, then I said, "Yeah, why not?" Planning the wedding was straightforward. We wanted something simple, something that felt true to who we were. We talked about what we loved, finding out we both preferred a small ceremony with just close friends and family around. As we planned our life together, we realized how much we had in common. We both dreamt of starting our own business, using my inheritance as a stepping stone. Mark was full of ideas, always sketching out plans on napkins or the back of receipts. "Think about it, Liv. We could build something great, something just ours," he'd say, his eyes lighting up with every new idea. "Yeah, I love that. Building our future, together," I'd reply, equally caught up in the excitement. We spent nights talking about the possibilities, from the type of business we could start to the places we might travel. Our life was laid out before us, a map of dreams and shared ambitions. Before we got married, he suggested we should use the inheritance from my dad, those shares I got, to kickstart our own thing. It felt right, you know? Building something from scratch together. I was all in, but I figured I should run it by Mom first. I remember sitting in her old, cozy kitchen, the one with yellow wallpaper that's seen better days. I spilled the beans about using the inheritance as startup capital. Mom's face got all serious, like it does when she's about to drop some heavy advice. "Olivia, you gotta protect yourself. Get a prenup, she insisted, stirring her coffee slowly. Make sure it says if one of you cheats and bails, they lose their share in the business. I frowned, kinda taken aback. Mom, why bring up cheating? I trust Mark. We're not gonna screw each other over. She sighed, the sound heavy with old hurts. I'm just saying, Olivia, because of what your father did to me. It's not about trust, it's about being smart. I felt a sting at that, realizing maybe she had a point. I didn't want to think about it, but arguing felt wrong. Sorry, Mom. I guess you're right, I murmured, feeling that knot in my gut loosen a bit. When I told Mark about the prenup, he wasn't thrilled. At first, he just went quiet, and I could tell he was mulling it over. A prenup, Liv? Really? He finally said, his voice a mix of surprise and a bit of hurt. Yeah, it's just, my mom suggested it. It's like insurance, you know? Not that I think we'll ever need it. I rushed to explain, watching his reaction closely. He took a deep breath, ran his fingers through his hair, and then looked me straight in the eyes. I love you, Liv. You're the most important person in my world. If this makes you feel secure, then I'm on board. Let's do it your way. Hearing him say that, it felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. We got the prenup sorted, making sure it was fair but firm on the terms. And after that, there was a modest and dignified wedding ceremony, exactly the kind I dreamed of. We went ahead and sold those shares, and the money that came in was more than enough to get our dream off the ground. Mark's eyes practically lit up when we saw the figures. This is it, Liv. We're gonna make it big, he said, his excitement infectious. We poured everything into setting up our business. It was going to be a wholesale warehouse for medical equipment. Neither of us had any real experience in it, but Mark was great with people and I had a head for numbers. It seemed like the perfect match. We'll start small, grow fast. Keep overheads low and expand when we can afford it, Mark planned out loud as we toured potential warehouse spots. Sounds like a plan, I agreed, already picturing the busy warehouse, the orders flying in, our future unfolding. Our wholesale medical equipment business started picking up speed faster than we anticipated. The demand was high, and suddenly, we were swamped. It was a good problem to have, but it was still a problem. Mark, we need to hire more help. It's just us, and we can't keep up, I said one evening, my voice drowning in a sea of paperwork on our dining table. Mark, his face buried in his laptop, barely looked up. We can manage a bit longer. Hiring means spending, Liv. Let's just push through this. I sighed, rubbing my temples. Push through? Look at us, Mark. We're burning out. This isn't sustainable. He shot me a look, a mix of frustration and fatigue. Alright, let's look into it, but we keep it tight. Maybe 1 or 2 part-timers. Agreeing on that was a relief, but it was just the start of our growing pains. With new staff came new responsibilities, training, payroll, and management stuff that neither of us had much clue about. I took it upon myself to learn on the fly. I signed up for a couple of online courses on business management and accounting. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. Hey, I found this online course on accounting. Thought it might help with the books, I told Mark one night as we were locking up the warehouse. He nodded, looking genuinely relieved. That's great, Liv. I've been worried about keeping up with all that. But as the business grew, so did the tension between us. We were both stressed, and it started to show. Mark was out networking and securing deals while I was back at the warehouse, keeping everything running. It felt like we were living separate lives. One particularly rough day, I snapped. You're always out there, schmoozing and having a grand old time, while I'm stuck here sorting out mess after mess. Mark's face hardened. Schmoozing? You think I enjoy this? This is for us, for the business, Liv. It doesn't feel like us anymore, Mark. It feels like you and me, separately. I shot back, my voice cracking a bit from the stress. We both cooled down eventually, but it was clear we needed to make some changes. We decided to start scheduling regular meetings to sync up, discuss what was happening in both sides of the business, and just reconnect as a couple, not just business partners. Let's try to not talk shop during dinner, okay? Just us, no business talk, Mark suggested during one of our first attempts to balance work and life. I agreed, more than ready to find some normalcy again. Deal. And maybe we can actually take a day off together soon? Like a real day off? As we implemented these small changes, things started to improve. The business was still demanding, but managing our roles and stress became a bit easier. It was a learning curve, dealing with the growth of our business and the strains it put on us. As our business grew, so did the workload. I was buried in the day-to-day operations, managing everything from inventory to customer complaints. It was nonstop, and all that stress, coupled with too many quick meals eaten at my desk, meant I started putting on weight. My once casual jeans became a struggle to zip up, and I barely recognized the woman staring back at me in the mirror. It wasn't just the physical changes, I felt myself wearing down, losing that spark I used to have. Mark, on the other hand, spent his days schmoozing with trading partners. It was all about networking for him, building relationships that would benefit our business. But as he threw himself more and more into that part of the job, I felt him drifting away. He started coming home late, his reasons vague, his explanations hurried. Just had to wrap up with a client, or got caught up at the office, he'd say. It was happening too often, and it didn't sit right with me. One evening, with the party of one of our biggest suppliers just around the corner, Mark dropped a bombshell that left me reeling. We were in our kitchen, me trying to decide if I should even bother trying on another dress that I knew would be too tight, when he came out with it. "Liv, you're not coming to the party," he declared, not even bothering to look up from his phone. I froze, a dress in my hands. "Excuse me? Why the hell not?" He finally looked up, his expression cold and detached. "Look, the people there, they have a certain image. You don't fit it anymore, Liv." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means you've let yourself go, Liv. You don't look the part, and I can't have you standing next to me tonight. It's bad for business," he said bluntly, as if he was talking about a faulty piece of equipment rather than his wife. I threw the dress down, my whole body shaking with anger and hurt. "So, I'm just an embarrassment to you now? Is that it?" He shrugged, his indifference like a slap in the face. "I'm thinking about the business. That's what you should be doing instead of getting upset over a party." The words stung, and I could feel tears prickling at the back of my eyes, but I fought them back. "You go to your precious party, Mark. Don't worry about me." He left without another word, and I spent the night alone, the silence of the house echoing around me like a mockery. The more I thought about it, the more it hurt. Was this what our marriage had come to? Was the business all he cared about now? When he came back, it was late. I was sitting in the living room, the lights off, just waiting. I needed to understand why he thought it was okay to treat me like this. "How was the party?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the turmoil inside. "It was fine. Got some promising leads," he replied casually, as if nothing had happened. "That's good," I said, keeping my voice calm. "And was it worth it? Making your wife feel like garbage?" He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Look, Liv, this is how these things work. You wouldn't understand. It's all about appearances." "Appearances. Right," I said, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. "So, our marriage is just another business deal to you now?" He didn't answer, just mumbled something about being tired and headed to bed. The fallout from that dreadful party night seemed to linger around the house like a thick fog, choking out any warmth we had left. Quarrels with Mark became the new norm. He started picking at everything about me, my weight, my few wrinkles, even how I dressed. "You going to wear that old thing again?" he'd sneer, or, "Guess we're not the young couple we used to be, huh?" I tried to brush off these jabs, but it was clear something had shifted. Mark started avoiding me, not just when we were out, but at home too. It stung more than I wanted to admit. Things got so bad that he even moved out of our bedroom, claiming he needed space to think. Then, one evening, he came home in one of his moods and tossed a gym membership card into my lap. "Here, thought you might want to actually use one of these for a change," he said, his voice dripping with disdain. I looked up at him, hurt by his blunt words. "Mark, you know how swamped I am with the business. After a long day, I just want to relax, not spend hours at the gym." His face twisted into a scowl. "Relax? Is that what you call sitting around? Maybe if you took care of yourself, I wouldn't have to avoid bringing you along to meet clients." His words hit like a slap. "Calling me lazy and fat, really? That's low, even for you," I shot back, my voice shaky with a mix of anger and humiliation. Mark just shrugged, his disdain apparent. "If the shoe fits," he muttered, before turning to head to his room. That night, as I lay alone in our big, empty bed, his words echoed in my head. I had never felt so low, so unattractive. It wasn't just the business that was between us now, it was this growing, gnawing gap where respect used to live. His absences became more frequent. Nights where he didn't come home at all became common. Each time I questioned him, he'd snap at me. "It's none of your business where I am." His coldness was slicing through me, day by day. The man I had married, who used to laugh and dream with me, was turning into a stranger, one who seemed to disdain every part of me. It was a regular Saturday evening. I'd made dinner, hoping maybe we could just have a peaceful meal for once, but the tension between us was like a thick cloud, impossible to ignore. I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. "Mark, we need to talk. This isn't working anymore," I said, my voice steady but my hands trembling slightly as I set down my fork. He looked up from his plate, his expression darkening. "What are you talking about?" "I think we should get a divorce. We can split the business 50-50 and go our separate ways," I suggested, trying to keep my voice calm. Mark slammed his hand on the table, making the plates clatter. "Divorce? Split the business? You must be out of your mind. I built this business. Everything we have is because of my hard work. You're not taking half of it." His fury was like nothing I had seen before. He leaned in, his face twisted with anger. "I will hire the best lawyers and take every last cent from you if I have to. You're not getting anything." I recoiled from his harshness, feeling a mixture of fear and shock. "Mark, please. Don't you dare, please me, you scary, lazy fat woman. Don't bother me anymore and get out of my house," he yelled, his voice echoing off the walls. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I couldn't hold them back. I rushed to the bathroom to wash my face, trying to calm down. That's when I noticed Mark's phone on the counter. It buzzed with a new message, and without thinking, I picked it up. The message on the screen was from someone named Jesse, full of heart emojis. "I love you so much, can't wait to see you again," it read. My heart pounded as I typed in his password, his birthday, easy to remember, and opened his messages. The texts I found were like daggers. Love notes, plans for a getaway, selfies of them together, and even a message thanking him for the new car he'd bought her. I felt sick to my stomach, not just from the betrayal, but from the sheer audacity of his deceit. But as I scrolled through more messages, something within me snapped. No longer was I just the heartbroken wife, I was now a woman scorned, fueled by a cold, calculating anger. I made copies of everything, photos, texts, receipts for the car. Anything that could help me in the coming storm. Then, carefully, I replaced his phone exactly where he'd left it. When I walked out of that bathroom, I was a different person. I didn't confront Mark. I didn't break down again. I simply went back to the table, cleared the dishes, and planned my next move in silence. He suspected nothing, still consumed by his own rage and arrogance. The very next day, I went to our office early, before anyone else could arrive. My mind was set, I needed to gather all the evidence before I could make my next move. I started with the financial documents and company accounts, meticulously checking each entry to piece together how Mark managed his deceit. It didn't take long before I found what I was looking for, a record of the car he purchased for his mistress. The amount and the date were all clearly listed, right there in our business expenditures. It was more than just a betrayal, it was embezzlement. Armed with copies of every incriminating document, I left the office feeling a mix of dread and determination. Sitting in the lawyer's office later that morning, I laid out everything. He's been unfaithful, and I have proof. Texts, pictures, even a receipt for a car he bought for his mistress, I said, handing over the copies I'd made. The lawyer looked over the documents, her expression unreadable. This is good. With the prenup and this evidence, we have a strong case. He won't see what hit him. I nodded, the reality of the situation settling in. I want to keep the business. It's not just his, I've worked too hard to let it go. We'll make sure of it, she assured me, her confidence reassuring. Armed with legal advice, I returned home to face Mark. He was in the living room, scrolling through his phone, oblivious to the storm coming his way. We need to talk, I said, standing at the entrance, my resolve firm. He looked up, annoyance flickering across his face. What now, Liv? I've seen the texts, Mark. I know about Jesse, I stated flatly, watching his face change from annoyance to shock. What are you talking about? He stammered, putting down his phone. Don't bother denying it. I've got all the proof I need. And I've seen a lawyer, I continued, my voice cold. Mark got up, his demeanor shifting to one of anger. You went through my phone? You're invading my privacy now? This is beyond privacy, Mark. You cheated. You lied. And you threatened me. It's over, I said, cutting off his attempts to intimidate me. He scoffed, shaking his head. You think you can take the business from me? You're nothing without me. That's where you're wrong. I'm everything I need to be. And I have enough to prove your infidelity, which, thanks to our prenup, means I get the business. I shot back, my confidence growing with every word. Mark was silent for a moment, his face a mix of anger and disbelief. You won't get away with this. I already have, Mark. I'm 2 steps ahead. And I'm taking what I deserve, I said, feeling a strange mix of triumph and sadness. By the time our court date rolled around, I was ready. Mark tried to fight, but the evidence was overwhelming. When the judge finally made the ruling, it was almost surreal. By court order and according to our prenuptial agreement, half of the business owned by Mark was awarded to me. This decision not only solidified my control over the company we built together, but also handed me the reins to our entire family fortune. But I didn't stop there. Given the deceit and the emotional trauma Mark had caused, I demanded financial compensation. The judge, seeing the clear evidence of Mark's infidelity and financial misconduct, granted this too. As I stood outside the courthouse, the cool breeze felt like a fresh start, washing away the remnants of a battle hard-fought and hard-won. Back at the office, the atmosphere was palpably different. I walked through the doors not just as a co-owner, but as the CEO. The employees looked up, some with smiles, others with a cautious curiosity about what changes might come. But all I felt was a surge of determination to steer the ship right. Morning, everyone. I greeted them with a newfound confidence. Let's get to work. We've got a lot to do, and I'm here to make sure we succeed more than ever. The responses were mixed, but mostly positive. People were ready for a fresh start as much as I was. I spent the day going through plans, meeting with department heads, and laying out the new vision for the company. It was exhilarating to have full control, to make decisions based on what I believed was best for our future. Late in the afternoon, I sat down in my office, the sun casting long shadows across the floor. The phone rang. It was Mark. A part of me tensed up at the sound of his voice, but I reminded myself of the new reality. Olivia, I've been thinking, he started, his voice hesitant. I made a mistake, a huge one. I was wondering if, maybe you could consider taking me back. In any capacity, at the company? The audacity of his request took me aback, but I managed to keep my composure. "Mark, you've got some nerve calling here. After everything, you really think I'd let you back into my life, into my company?" I know it's a lot to ask," he stammered. "But I'm out of options, Olivia." "That sounds like a you problem, Mark. This company, my company, is moving forward, not backward. You made your bed. Now you lie in it," I said firmly. "Olivia, please." He tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. "I think you've said enough, Mark. Goodbye." I cut him off, hanging up before he could say another word. It felt good to finally close that chapter, to assert my independence without a trace of doubt. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I rebranded the company, shifting our focus to innovation and community impact. We started initiatives that were close to my heart, like sponsoring health programs and investing in eco-friendly technologies. The community and the industry took notice. Sales were up, morale was high, and for the first time in a long time, I felt genuinely proud of what I was building. I've never been one to chase the spotlight or crave company. My life was just fine revolving around my job as an online tutor, from the quiet of my own home, my haven, the house I inherited after my parents passed. I kept to a simple routine: wake up, work, and maybe, just maybe, if I felt like seeing another human face, I'd stroll to the local pastry shop down the block. The pastry shop was my occasional escape. Mrs. Evelyn, the saleswoman, was the type to know everyone's business, but in a charming sort of way. The shop smelled like cinnamon and sugar, and the bell above the door jingled with a quaint, welcoming sound every time I pushed it open. It was on one of these routine visits that Mrs. Evelyn decided to play matchmaker. As she slid a steaming cup of coffee across the counter, her eyes twinkled like she was onto something. "You know, Tessa, my son's just about your age," she started, arranging the pastries with more vigor than necessary. "Still single too. You should meet him sometime." I laughed it off, stirring cream into my coffee. "Thanks, but I'm alright on my own." "Really?" Mrs. Evelyn shrugged, a mischievous smile on her face. "Well, we'll just see about that." I thought nothing of it until my next visit, when I opened the door to find not just the usual scent of baked goods, but also a new face behind the counter. He was tall, awkward in a charming way, and when he turned around, his smile was immediately disarming. "Hi, Tessa, I'm Jack, Evelyn's son. I think she's mentioned me?" His words caught me off guard. Mentioned him? More like schemed up an entire meet-cute without telling me. "Oh, yeah, she might have said something," I replied, trying not to show my surprise. Jack handed me a blueberry muffin, on the house, and leaned on the counter. "She thinks she's being slick, setting us up like this. Sorry if it's weird." I couldn't help but laugh. "A bit unexpected, but it's fine. She means well." As he talked about his job and his hobbies, which, surprisingly, included a lot of reading, something we had in common, I found myself genuinely interested. Jack wasn't just some guy his mom wanted to push on a customer, he was actually pretty cool. "Do you come here often then? To get away from the chaos of the world?" he asked, gesturing to the shop. "Yeah, it's my little retreat. Good coffee, better pastries, and now, apparently, decent company," I said with a smirk. Jack grinned, clearly pleased. "Decent? I'll take that as a compliment, coming from someone who'd rather be at home." The conversation flowed easily after that, the initial awkwardness melting away like butter on a hot muffin. By the time I left the shop, phone numbers exchanged and a promise to grab dinner together sometime soon hanging between us, I had to admit, Mrs. Evelyn might have been onto something after all. A year of dating flew by like it was nothing. Jack and I got along easily, slipping into a comfortable routine of shared dinners and late-night talks about everything and nothing. It wasn't long before we were making plans for a wedding and, not long after that, Jack moved into my house, the same house I grew up in, the one I inherited from my folks. Jack's parents lived just a few blocks away, which at first seemed like a blessing. Having family nearby, I thought, would be nice for a change. Initially, it was all casual visits and pleasant enough dinners. But soon after the wedding, the atmosphere began to change. His mom, Mrs. Evelyn, who had once been the sweet lady from the pastry shop, started showing up more often, and not just for casual visits. Each time she came over, it was like she had a checklist in her head of all the things I was doing wrong. "You know, Tessa, Jack likes his shirts ironed a certain way," she mentioned one afternoon, pulling out a supposedly clean shirt from the closet and examining it like it was evidence in a trial. I tried to keep my cool, biting back any sharp retorts. "I'm usually caught up with my online classes during the day, so sometimes things like that slip my mind," I explained, hoping she'd understand. Mrs. Evelyn sked, shaking her head as she placed the shirt back. "When I was your age, I kept the house spotless and worked part-time at the bakery. It's really about managing your time better." The comment stung, especially coming from her. It was as if the simple, kind woman I met at the shop had been swapped out for a relentless critic. Each visit seemed to have a new complaint: the food was too bland, the floors weren't swept well enough, or I wasn't taking good enough care of Jack. Jack's dad was more on the quiet side, but he had his moments too. "Lunch isn't ready?" he'd grumble, checking his watch dramatically as if he'd been starving for days. "I work from home, yes, but I'm actually working, not just hanging around," I tried to explain, more than once, my voice firm but controlled. They nodded, murmured something about understanding, but the next visit, it'd start all over again. I found myself dreading the sound of the doorbell, knowing it likely meant another critique was coming my way. Despite the growing frustration, I held my tongue. Arguing wouldn't help, I thought. Jack was caught in the middle, trying to smooth things over, telling me his parents just meant well and that maybe they were just set in their ways. "They're from a different time, Tessa, you know? They don't get the whole work-from-home thing," Jack would say, trying to bridge the gap between us. But no matter how much I nodded and smiled, a part of me burned with every sideways comment about my cooking or cleaning. They still live separately, though, I reassured myself after each visit. "It's just a couple of hours a week. I can handle this." One sunny afternoon, I was wrapping up an online session with a student when I heard the sound of a truck pulling up outside. Curious, I peeked through the window and saw Jack helping his parents unload big bags and boxes from a truck that was parked out front. I walked outside, trying to keep my tone light. "Hey, what's all this?" Jack wiped his brow and gave me a sheepish look. Well, it looks like my parents are going to stay with us for a bit." "A bit? What does that mean, Jack?" I asked, my voice rising, despite my attempt to stay calm. "It's just temporary, Tessa," he said quickly, almost tripping over his words. "Their house is being rented out for extra income. They thought it'd be easier to stay here for now." I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't just a visit. This was moving in. "Jack, don't we usually talk about big decisions like this?" I asked, my voice tight. Before he could reply, Mrs. Evelyn came bustling over, her voice full of false cheer. "Oh, darling, isn't this wonderful? We'll get to spend so much more time together." I forced a smile. "Mrs. Evelyn, how long are you planning to stay?" She waved a dismissive hand as if I'd asked about the weather. "Oh, just a while, dear. Until we sort things out. We're family now, right? Families help each other." I glanced at Jack, waiting for some support, but he avoided my gaze. That's when Mr. Peterson chimed in, his voice booming across the yard. "Where do you want this box, son? Should it go in the spare room?" They had it all planned out. And from the looks of it, my opinion didn't matter. It's been literally a few days, my home no longer felt like mine. Mrs. Evelyn took over the kitchen, criticizing every meal I made. "You need to add more salt, Tessa. And this meat is all wrong. Jack likes it tender." I clenched my fists, counting to 10 in my head before responding. "I've been cooking for Jack just fine till now, Mrs. Evelyn." She sked and shook her head, muttering about young people not knowing how to take advice. Then there were the comments about the house. "You really should clean more often," Mrs. Evelyn would say, running her finger along a shelf and inspecting the dust. "In my house, you could eat off the floors." Jack, for his part, was stuck in the middle. He'd come home from work to find us at odds and sigh. "Can't you two just get along? She's trying to help. By taking over our lives?" I'd shoot back, frustration boiling over. Every day was a struggle. I felt like I was losing bits of my home and myself with each passing moment. The tension was palpable, the air thick with unspoken words and stifled anger. I loved Jack, but living with his parents under my roof, with their constant critiques and disregard for my boundaries, was becoming unbearable. Every day started the same since Jack's parents moved in. The shrill alarm of the old clock they brought with them would pierce the quiet of dawn, signaling the start of what felt like a marathon. Before I could even sip my morning coffee, Mrs. Evelyn would already be bustling around the kitchen, a storm dressed in an apron. "You're up late today, Tessa," she'd comment, as if 7 a.m. was noon. I'd mumble something about having a late session the night before and brace myself for the avalanche of tasks she deemed necessary to start the day. One particular morning, as I tried to prep for an online tutoring session, Mrs. Evelyn barged into my makeshift office with a laundry basket full of clothes that apparently needed urgent washing. "Here, do these next. And make sure you separate the whites this time," she instructed, her voice leaving no room for argument. I bit back my frustration. "Mrs. Evelyn, I've got back-to-back sessions today. Can it wait?" She planted her hands on her hips, her favorite stance for lectures. "This will just take a minute. Priorities, dear. You can teach any time." "But this is my job," I countered, my voice rising despite my resolve to keep calm. "I have students waiting." She shrugged, unfazed. "They can wait a few more minutes. Family first, right?" It was always like this, her needs and rules overshadowing mine. I was drowning in a sea of unwelcome chores and constant criticism, and Jack was no lifeboat. He'd leave early for work, kiss me goodbye, and vanish, leaving me to navigate the choppy waters with his parents alone. Lunchtime was another battle. If it wasn't Mrs. Evelyn criticizing the saltiness of the soup, it was Mr. Peterson complaining about the timing. "It's past noon, and lunch isn't ready," he'd grumble, checking his watch like it was a countdown to some catastrophic event. I'd clench my teeth, forcing a smile. "It's almost done, Mr. Peterson. Just a few more minutes. It should be on the table by now. Back in my day, we had schedules," he'd mutter, his words edged with a bitterness that soured the food even before it hit the table. One day, fed up with the mounting pressure, I snapped. It was a Tuesday, nothing special about it, except for my patients wearing thinner than the soles of the slippers Mrs. Evelyn insisted I wear inside. "I am not your maid, and this is not a diner," I exclaimed as Mrs. Evelyn hovered over my shoulder while I chopped vegetables. "I can't keep up with this and my work. It's too much." Mrs. Evelyn recoiled as if I'd slapped her. "I'm just trying to maintain some standards in my son's home," she retorted, her voice sharp and cold. "It's my home too," I shot back, slamming the knife down on the cutting board. "And I can't do everything around here. I'm working, too, remember?" Jack walked in right then, his timing as impeccable as ever. "What's going on here?" he asked, looking from his flustered mother to me. I shook my head, too weary to explain again. "Ask your mother," I said, leaving the kitchen and the mounting pile of grievances behind. Everything took a sharp turn downhill when Mrs. Evelyn decided to quit her job at the bakery. She said she was tired and figured she'd be more use around the house helping out. If only that were true. Instead, her idea of helping was bursting into my home office during an online tutoring session and yelling that it was time to start cooking dinner. It was mortifying. "Are you going to start on dinner, Tessa? It's getting late, and we're all hungry," she bellowed one afternoon, not caring that my microphone was on and my students could hear every word. I muted the mic, cheeks burning with embarrassment. Mrs. Evelyn, I'm still working. Can we talk about this later? But she just waved her hand dismissively and walked out, leaving me to apologize to my students and try to regain my professional composure. Then there was Mr. Peterson, who seemed to think I just played on the computer all day. I don't see why you're always so busy, he'd grumble. Looks to me like you're just tapping away at games. It's not games, it's my job, I'd snap back, sharper than I intended. This is how I earn our living now. That's right, our living. Because 3 months into this new family arrangement, Jack came home in the middle of the day, looking like he'd lost a fight. I got laid off, Tessa. He confessed in a hushed tone, checking to make sure his parents weren't around. Please don't tell my folks yet, I don't want to worry them. So there I was, the only one bringing in any money, trying to cover all our expenses on just my tutor's salary. Bills piled up, and there was never enough to go around. Groceries, utilities, everything cost more with 4 adults in the house. One evening, I sat down with Jack and his parents to try to address the elephant in the room. We need to talk about finances, I started, my hands clenched in my lap to stop them from shaking. I'm the only one earning right now, and we're struggling to keep up with the bills. Mrs. Evelyn and Mr. Peterson looked at each other, then back at me. But Jack's working. He can cover it, Mrs. Evelyn said, her voice full of misplaced confidence. Jack shifted uncomfortably beside me. Actually, Mom, that's not true. I lost my job. The room went silent. Mr. Peterson coughed. You what? Why didn't you tell us? I didn't want to upset you, Jack mumbled, staring at his hands. I took a deep breath and plunged ahead. We can't cover everything on my salary alone. I was thinking maybe you could help out, contribute half the rent of your house to the family budget? Their reaction was as if I'd suggested something outrageous. Mrs. Evelyn's eyes narrowed. Why should we? You have a job. You should be able to handle it. Jack always took care of things before. I was at my breaking point. But I can't now. It's too much, and I need help. Jack put a hand on my shoulder. Maybe just give me some time to find a new job, okay? I'll sort it out. I nodded, more out of exhaustion than agreement. Every day felt like wading through quicksand. The harder I worked, the deeper we sank into debt. It was during one of our usual tense dinners when Mrs. Evelyn casually threw out their latest extravagant plan. She waved a glossy travel brochure at me, her eyes glinting with excitement. We're planning a little getaway, 2 weeks in Spain. So, darling, would you prefer a scarf or a shell as a souvenir? I stared at her, my fork halfway to my mouth, completely thrown off. A vacation? Now? Oh yes, she gushed, her enthusiasm undimmed. And we were wondering if you could chip in a little. Just $2,000 for some pocket money. It's nothing too much, right? I slammed my fork down, my patience finally snapping. Where's all this money coming from? You spend on restaurants, clothes, now a vacation. And you haven't contributed a dime to the house expenses. How can you even ask for more money? Jack's face paled, and Mr. Peterson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, but Mrs. Evelyn just plowed ahead, oblivious. Oh, we've been saving up, and a little help from family isn't too much to ask, is it? Saving? By leeching off us? I shot back, my voice rising. You don't pay for groceries, rent, nothing. And you still expect me to fund your trips? Jack tried to interject, his voice tight. Let's calm down and talk this. No, I'm done talking, I interrupted, pushing back from the table. You barge into my office, disrupt my work, and have the audacity to call this help? I have no space, no privacy. How is this a family? Mrs. Evelyn's face crumpled, and she burst into theatrical tears. How can you say such things, Tessa? We've done so much for you. We've even kept quiet about things, like how often we've talked Jack out of leaving you. The room went still. What? My voice was a whisper, disbelief etched into every syllable. Jack, is that true? Jack looked down, his face flushed with shame or anger, I couldn't tell. Mom, what are you talking about? But Mrs. Evelyn, clutching her chest, diverted the crisis. Oh, my heart. This stress isn't good for me. Could you get my pills from upstairs, dear? I stormed out of the room, my mind racing. Halfway up the stairs, I paused. Wait, what were the pills called again? I turned back, heading towards the dining room to ask, but stopped short when I heard Jack's hushed voice through the slightly ajar door. No, Mom, you almost blew everything. We need to keep this quiet until we sell the house. If she leaves me now, I get nothing. Make sure you're not pushing too hard, just enough so she wants to sell. My heart sank as I listened, hidden from view. His words chilled me to the core. We keep up the pressure, she sells, I divorce her, and get half. Then we can sell the old house and buy something better. Just keep it together, stop buying expensive stuff for a while, and coordinate with me first. I leaned against the wall, feeling the weight of their betrayal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing, my marriage, my home, it was all a setup. Taking deep breaths, I composed myself and walked back into the dining room. Mrs. Evelyn was wiping her eyes, miraculously recovered. I forgot to ask, what's the name of your medicine? She smiled sweetly, a stark contrast to her earlier performance. Oh, it's nothing, Tessa. I'm feeling much better now. Thank you. As I sat back down, I knew I had to play along. They didn't know that I knew, and I needed to keep it that way. Inside, I was reeling, but outwardly, I was calm. I needed a plan, and until then, I had to keep my cards close to my chest. The next morning, I woke up with a plan crystal clear in my mind. I canceled all my classes for the day, a first since I started tutoring online. I drove to the lawyer's office, my hands slightly trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. At the lawyer's, I laid everything out, the overheard conversations, my financial contributions, everything. The lawyer was meticulous, making sure that the divorce papers were ironclad, especially regarding the ownership of the house and my assets. They won't see a cent of your property, he assured me, his voice firm and resolute. When I returned home, the atmosphere was stifling. Jack and his parents were in the living room, an air of impatient waiting hanging over them. As soon as I walked in, Mrs. Evelyn erupted. Where have you been all day? You couldn't even bother to make dinner before leaving? Her voice was shrill, echoing off the walls. I stood at the entrance, my resolve hardening. I'm done cooking. And I'm done tolerating disrespect in my own house, I replied, my voice calm but ice cold. Jack stood up, his expression a mix of frustration and a poorly masked desperation. Maybe it's best if we just sell the house and find somewhere else to go. Start fresh, you know, without my parents? He was playing his part, thinking he was steering the conversation towards his goal. His parents froze, their faces a picture of greedy anticipation. But I couldn't help but laugh, a short, humorless sound that bounced sharply around the room. Sell the house? Oh, Jack, I know about everything. Your plans with your parents. It's over. I pulled the divorce papers from my bag and slapped them down on the coffee table in front of him. Here are the divorce papers. I want you and your parents out of my house immediately. The room erupted. Jack's face turned a deep red, his eyes wide in shock. Mrs. Evelyn began to sob dramatically, while Mr. Peterson stood up, his body tense with anger. You can't do this to us, we're family. That's no family of mine, I shot back. You tried to cheat me out of my home, my security. It's done. Jack made a move as if to argue, but I cut him off. I have recordings of your plans. My lawyer is fully aware of everything. Leave, or I will call the police. They gathered their things, Mrs. Evelyn wailing the entire time, while Mr. Peterson muttered curses under his breath. Jack looked defeated, the reality of his situation finally dawning on him as he realized the game was up. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. I threw myself into revamping the house, turning it back into the sanctuary it had been before. Each room was cleansed of any remnants of the past months, every cushion, every piece of linen that held any trace of them was replaced. One afternoon, while rearranging the living room, my phone buzzed. It was a call from Emma, a friend I hadn't spoken to in months, too embarrassed to tell anyone about the mess my life had become. "Hey, Tessa, I heard about the divorce." Emma's voice came through, tinged with concern. "How are you holding up?" I paused, paintbrush in hand, looking around at the half-finished room. "I'm okay, Emma. Actually, I'm better than okay. I'm starting something new. I'm expanding my online tutoring into a full-blown virtual academy. Planning to offer courses worldwide." We chatted a bit more, and after hanging up, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. My life was truly my own again, and I was going to make something incredible out of it. Days turned into weeks, and my project began to take shape. I hired a small team, working tirelessly to build a platform that wasn't just about learning, but about connecting people across the globe. The response was overwhelming. Students from different countries signed up, eager to be part of a community that promised more than just education. Several weeks later, Mrs. Evelyn called me. The house they had rented out burned down due to faulty electrical wiring, a disaster exacerbated by her failure to renew their insurance on time. "Can we stay with you, just for a little while? We have nowhere to go," she pleaded over the phone. The pause was brief. "No, Mrs. Evelyn," I replied firmly. "We are strangers now. I wish you the best." Hanging up, I felt a twinge of something, a remnant of the bond one thought we had. But stronger than that was the conviction in my own voice, the certainty in my choice. I'm Ella. I'm 27, work as an IT manager at a top tech firm, and I pretty much live at my desk. So when my friend Laura dragged me to her birthday bash at some fancy downtown restaurant, I had no idea my night would start with a splash, literally. Stepping out of the taxi, ready to maybe enjoy myself for once, I was met by a wall of muddy water. Some guy in a fancy car thought the puddle next to me was perfect for a splash scene straight out of a movie. My brand new dress took the hit, soaking up the murky water like a sponge. "Fantastic," I muttered, glaring at my ruined outfit. "Hey, I am so sorry." The driver, a tall, rugged type with a messy head of hair, jumped out, looking more horrified than I felt. He approached with his hands raised as if I might smack him with my purse. "You've gotta be kidding me. Look at my dress." I snapped, too shocked to accept an apology. Laura, ever the peacemaker, rushed over, stifling a laugh. "Ella, meet Darren," she said, barely keeping a straight face. "Darren, this is Ella, the birthday girl's very best friend who you just drenched." Darren winced. "Great first impression, huh?" he said with a crooked smile that was probably supposed to be charming. "Let me make it up to you, dinner, on me, to start with? Because you've got a tab running for ruining dresses?" I shot back. Laura nudged me, giving me a "give him a break" look. "Come on, it's just water. It'll dry," Laura chuckled, linking her arm in mine and leading me toward the entrance. Darren followed, looking genuinely apologetic and slightly amused by my fiery welcome. Inside, the restaurant buzzed with Lara's other friends, but she steered us to a quieter corner with a clean, dry table. "You guys start here. I'll grab drinks, and Ella, try not to murder him before I get back," she teased, leaving Darren and me in an awkward silence. He pulled out a chair for me, and I sat, folding my arms. "I'm Darren. And before I made a splash, I was actually hoping to meet you tonight. Lara's told me a lot about you," he started, trying to smooth things over. "Did she also tell you I hate surprises?" I quipped, finally cracking a reluctant smile. "I'm Ella, IT manager and apparently a mud magnet." Darren laughed. "I work in marketing. Maybe I can help you market your new look? Post-puddle chic could be the next big thing." I rolled my eyes. "Don't quit your day job," I said, warming up to his attempt at humor. Laura returned with a tray of drinks, breaking the ice further. "Here, maybe this will clean the slate," she said, handing us our drinks. "So, Darren, got any more surprises up your sleeve?" I asked, taking a sip of my drink. "Just my charming personality and dazzling conversation skills," he replied with a grin. "Oh, and an apology dinner. I'm serious about that. Let me take you out to make up for the disaster." I considered him for a moment, his earnest face making me soften a bit. "All right, you're on," I conceded. "But I'm choosing the place. Somewhere without any puddles nearby." By the end of the night, the dress was still a mess, but my initial anger had dried up, replaced by a reluctant intrigue towards Darren. Maybe this disaster of a night could turn into something worthwhile. After Darren's disastrous yet somehow endearing introduction, we started seeing each other. It wasn't long before casual dinners turned into weekend getaways, late-night talks, and eventually, meeting each other's families. I should have known things would get more complicated once families got involved. "Look, I really like you, Ella," Darren said one evening as we walked through the park, his hand finding mine. "I think it's time you met my folks. What do you say?" "Sure," I agreed, squeezing his hand, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in my stomach. Meeting the parents was a big step, but after the way we started, what was the worst that could happen? The day arrived, and Darren drove us to a modest house in the suburbs. His mom, Janet, and his dad, Tom, greeted us with warm smiles that didn't quite reach their eyes. Dinner was served, and that's when the questions began. "So, Ella, Darren tells us you're in IT?" Tom asked, passing me the mashed potatoes. "Yeah, I manage a team at a tech firm downtown," I answered, trying to keep my tone light. Janet leaned in, her eyes sharp. "Must be a good position. What does that pay, if you don't mind my asking?" I choked on my water a bit. "Well, it's enough to keep me busy and out of trouble," I joked, trying to dodge the question. "And your family? Do you support anyone?" Janet continued, her gaze fixed on me like a detective interrogating a suspect. "Just my aunt," I replied, feeling my cheeks heat up. "She raised me. I help her out when I can." "That's very noble of you," Tom noted, his tone suggesting he was sizing up my financial worthiness rather than my character. I changed the subject, talking about a recent project at work, but the vibe had shifted. We left soon after dessert, and I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. On the drive back, I mentioned the interrogation to Darren. "Your parents have a lot of questions about money, huh?" Darren shrugged. "That's just how they are. Always planning, always calculating. Don't sweat it." I decided to call my Aunt Tessa later that night to unload. "Ella, you need to watch out," she warned over the phone after hearing about the dinner. "People who start with money questions never stop. They're marking you." "Aunt Tessa, they were just curious, I guess. Darren says it's normal for them." "Normal? Honey, there's curious, and there's nosy. And those two sound like they're planning to spend your money, not get to know you," she cautioned, her voice stern with experience. Months passed, and Darren's charm outweighed my reservations. When he proposed, it was sweet, simple, and in the same park where we'd decided to meet his parents. "Marry me, Ella. Let's start our own family tradition," he said, his eyes hopeful. I said yes. The ring was beautiful, and the moment felt right. My doubts about his parents lingered, but love, as they say, was blind. As I prepared for bed that night, Aunt Tessa's words echoed in my head, mixing with Lara's. A knot of worry settled in my stomach, but I pushed it aside. Darren was worth it. His parents, well, I'd cross that bridge when I came to it. But deep down, I knew that bridge was coming up fast, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what was on the other side. Wedding planning kicked off at full throttle after Darren popped the question. I was over the moon, busy choosing flowers and tasting cake samples. I expected it to be stressful, but fun. What I didn't expect was how quickly the red flags would start waving, not just fluttering in the breeze. One evening, as we sat down with our laptops to budget our expenses, Darren looked unusually tense. "Ella, I've got to tell you something," he started, avoiding my eyes. "My job's been a bit rocky lately. I might not be able to chip in as much as I wanted for the wedding." I raised an eyebrow, putting down my coffee. "Okay, how much are we talking?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I can barely cover the band, maybe." "So, what? I cover everything else? The venue, catering, photographer?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Darren winced. "I hate asking you this, babe. But yeah, I think you'll need to. Just until I sort things out at work." I leaned back, processing. "We can downsize. Cut the guest list, cheaper venue." "No." Darren cut in quickly, a little too quickly. "I mean, my parents would be upset. They've already told everyone. It's got to be good, Ella." My stomach nodded. "Fine," I said finally, not wanting to argue. "But we'll need to stick to a strict budget." As the wedding day approached, the expenses piled up, and Darren's contributions dwindled. His parents, Janet and Tom, were no help either. They had opinions about everything, from the flower arrangements to the menu, but never once offered financial help or to tone down their lavish tastes. The wedding day itself was beautiful despite the behind-the-scenes drama. I managed to push aside my frustration and focus on Darren, who looked genuinely happy as he waited for me at the altar. The ceremony was perfect, but the reception was where things started to unravel. As we mingled with guests, I noticed Janet and Tom huddled around the gift table, whispering and pointing. Curious, I wandered over. "Everything okay here?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, Ella, we're just sorting. Some of these gifts will look better at our house, don't you think?" Janet said, her voice too sweet. I stared at her, stunned. "What? No, these gifts are for Darren and me." Tom shrugged, smirking. "Come on, Ella. Don't be petty. We're family now. What's ours is yours, and vice versa, right?" I felt my face flush with anger. "No, Tom. That's not how this works. These gifts are for us, for our home. Not yours." Janet rolled her eyes. "Really, Ella, don't make a fuss. Be gracious. We're just taking a few things. Nothing major." I bit my tongue, holding back a sharp retort. The last thing I wanted was a scene at my wedding. But as they walked away, a few gift envelopes and smaller presents in hand, I felt a simmering rage. After the wedding, it didn't take long for Darren's parents' true colors to start showing even more. Every time we invited them over, or there was some family gathering to attend, it was like opening a new chapter in the book of greed. It was my birthday next, and I decided to throw a little dinner at a decent restaurant in town. I thought it would be a nice change from home parties. I invited Darren and his parents, Janet and Tom. "I hope this place is okay for you guys," I mentioned casually as we sat down. The restaurant had a cozy vibe, not too flashy, but with great reviews. Janet scanned the menu with a raised eyebrow. "Well, it looks quaint. What's good here?" I recommended a couple of dishes that were my favorites, reasonably priced and delicious. But, as the waiter came around to take our order, Janet and Tom went off script. "We'll have the lobster tails, and oh, the filet mignon. And start us with a bottle of your finest wine," Tom declared, handing the menu back with a satisfied grin. I bit my lip to keep from reacting. "That's quite a selection," I managed to say, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. Janet smiled sweetly. "It's your birthday, dear. We should celebrate in style." The rest of the evening, I watched as they ordered more expensive items, barely touching them when they arrived. It irked me to no end seeing good food and money wasted like that. On the ride home, I let Darren have it. "Your parents, they always do this. They choose the priciest things and don't even enjoy them. It's like they do it just because they can." "Babe, calm down. That's just how they are. You know, old school, like to show off a bit," Darren explained, as if that was supposed to make me feel better. But it's disrespectful, Darren. They don't even think about how it looks or what it costs, I argued, frustrated. Darren sighed. Look, they're from a different time. Just let it slide. They mean well. The incident was soon followed by the holidays, which brought their own set of challenges. Christmas rolled around, and gift-giving turned into another display of imbalance. I spent time picking out thoughtful gifts for everyone, including Janet and Tom, ensuring to get them something they'd mentioned wanting. In return, they handed me a clearly last-minute, discounted item, still in the sale bag. Here you go, dear, Janet said, handing it over without much fanfare. I smiled, keeping my disappointment in check. Thanks. I hope you like what I got you, I replied, handing them their gifts, which were more than twice as expensive. Oh, how lovely, Tom said flatly, barely glancing at what was inside the package. The lack of effort on their part stung, especially when I saw the genuine appreciation from my friends for the simple but thoughtful gifts I had given them. Back home, I vented to Darren. It's always like this with them. Expensive tastes when they're spending my money, but when it's their turn, they just don't bother. Darren shrugged, looking uncomfortable. It's just how they show, affection. A $5 scarf from the clearance bin isn't affection, Darren. It's an insult, I snapped, tired of making excuses for them. After dealing with one too many incidents of Darren's parents pushing their boundaries, I figured it was time for a change. When my big bonus hit, I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Darren, let's go to Hawaii, I said one night while we were sitting on the couch, trying to decide how to celebrate. Hawaii? That sounds amazing, babe, he replied, his eyes lighting up. Just the two of us? Exactly, just us. It's romantic, and I've always wanted to go, I explained, excited at the thought of sandy beaches and no family dramas. A couple of days later, I was in the middle of booking our trip when Darren came home from visiting his folks. He looked unusually excited. Guess what? My parents are stoked about Hawaii. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. Wait, what do you mean? I thought this was just for us. Darren laughed, a bit too nervously. Yeah, I mean, it is. But I mentioned it, and they've never been to Hawaii. They got super excited, and... Hold on. I cut him off, feeling my stomach tighten. You invited them? No, not exactly. I just told them about it, and they kind of invited themselves, he explained quickly. I closed my laptop with a snap. Darren, this was supposed to be our trip. Romantic, remember? He came over and sat down next to me, taking my hands. I know, but they really want to go. Can't we just? No, we can't just, I interrupted, pulling my hands away. This isn't a family vacation, Darren. It's for us. He was quiet for a moment, then his phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. They're already looking at flights. They think we're all going. That's because you didn't set boundaries, I exclaimed, frustration building. We can talk about this later, he said, standing up and going to the kitchen. But later came sooner than expected. The next day, Darren's parents showed up at our house, all smiles. Ella, dear, we've been looking at tours and hotels in Hawaii, Janet said cheerily. I was dumbfounded. We haven't decided anything yet. Tom chimed in, his tone expectant. Well, we thought it's settled. We're all excited to go. I looked at Darren, expecting some support. Darren, tell them, I urged. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my gaze. Look, why don't we all go? It'll be fun, and we can split the costs, he suggested weakly. I stared at him, then at them. No, that's not what we planned. Janet's face fell. But we thought it was a family trip. It's a romantic getaway for me and Darren. Just us, I stated firmly, feeling my resolve harden. There was an awkward silence, then Tom said, well, if that's how you feel, maybe you're being a bit selfish, Ella. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Selfish? For wanting to spend time alone with my husband? The conversation ended with them calling me selfish and leaving the house in a huff. Darren was quiet for a moment before he exploded. You could have just let them come, Ella. Why do you have to be like this? I'm like this? I just wanted something for us, Darren, just us. I shouted back, my voice echoing in the empty room. He didn't say anything after that. He just walked out of the room, and that was it. We didn't talk for a whole week. I woke up to an eerie silence in the house that morning, the kind that instantly told you something was off. Rolling over, I grabbed my phone off the nightstand and was greeted by a slew of notifications that punched the air right out of me. 3 tickets to Hawaii, all booked under my name, and a reservation for a hotel, also charged to my account. I sat up, my heart pounding as reality set in. Darren had done this. He and his parents were probably on their way to Hawaii right now, all on my dime. I didn't even bother calling. What was there to say? It was clear as day, my husband had taken the liberty to use my account to fund his little family getaway, despite everything we had discussed. Anger bubbled up inside me, and without a second thought, I logged into the booking site and cancelled everything booked in the opposite direction. Then I moved swiftly to my banking app and cut off his access to my funds. Hours later, my phone rang. It was Darren, and his tone was less than pleasant. Ella, what the hell? Why were we not checked into the hotel? And where are our return tickets? I held the phone away from my ear for a second, taking a deep breath to steady my voice. Because I'm not your ATM, Darren. I'm done funding your family's fantasies. You're all just a bunch of selfish leeches. He sputtered on the other end, clearly not expecting me to take such drastic measures. You can't just do that. We're stuck here now. If you don't fix this, I'll divorce you. I almost laughed at the irony. Go ahead, Darren. Do what you need to do. But don't expect another dime from me. I hung up, my hands trembling with a mix of rage and relief. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed with messages from both Darren and his mom. Threats, pleas, accusations, they tried every angle, but I wasn't having any of it. I didn't wait around for Darren to get back. Instead, I called a lawyer and started the divorce process myself. It was rough, knowing that a chapter of my life was ending like this, but there was no way I was going to stick around with someone who treated me like a cash machine for him and his parents. After hanging up with the lawyer, I drove to Aunt Tessa's house. She opened the door before I even knocked, like she knew I was coming and why. I did it, Aunt Tessa. I filed for divorce, I said as soon as I stepped inside. She just nodded, not saying I told you so, but her look said it all. You did the right thing, Ella. I know it's hard, but you're better off without someone who lets his family treat you that way. The next few days were a blur of sorting out my things and setting up a temporary life at Aunt Tessa's. I was starting to feel a bit more like myself, a bit steadier, when Darren showed up. He looked miserable, standing there on Aunt Tessa's front porch, a sad sight if I ever saw one. Ella, please. Can we talk? I'm sorry. I messed up, but we can fix this. I almost laughed at the audacity. Fix this? Darren, you chose your parents over your wife, used my money to take them to Hawaii after everything. There's no fixing that. Ella, No, Darren. You just showed me who you really are, and I don't want any part of that life, I interrupted, crossing my arms. You and your parents are cut from the same cloth, all take and no give. I'm done. Darren's face fell, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered all the stress and hurt, and the sympathy vanished. I hope you figure out your stuff, Darren. But you need to do it away from me, I added, turning to go back inside. Aunt Tessa was waiting right by the door, having heard it all. She didn't say much, just took my hand and gave it a squeeze. You're strong, Ella. Stronger than you think. 2 weeks after everything fell apart, I found myself sitting in a Stark law office across from Darren and his parents. The air was tense, charged with unsaid things and last-minute pleas. Darren looked worn, almost regretful, but it was his parents who took the lead. "Ella, please reconsider this," his mother started, her voice dripping with a sweetness I knew was as fake as her sympathy. "We were all so good together, remember? The trips, the holidays." I couldn't help but scoff. "You mean the trips I paid for? The holidays where I was treated more like a bank than a family member?" Darren's father chimed in, trying a softer approach. "We know things got a little out of hand, but we're family. Isn't that worth fighting for?" I shook my head, amazed by their audacity. Family doesn't use each other. And this isn't just a little out of hand. You showed me exactly how little you respect me. Darren finally spoke. "Ella, I'm sorry. Can't we start over? We can fix this." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw nothing of the man I thought I'd married. "Start over? After everything? No, Darren. We can't." His mother, not used to being dismissed, lost her composure. "Because of you, we had to pay our way back from Hawaii. Do you know how much that cost us?" I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so absurd. "Your greed and arrogance got you there, and they got you back. Seems fitting to me." The meeting ended with me standing firm, and them still trying to grasp at straws as they saw their control slipping away. I walked out of the office feeling lighter, as if I was finally shedding a heavy weight that had been pulling me down. After the divorce was finalized, I took one last step to ensure my new beginning was clear of any remnants of my old life with them. I blocked their numbers, all of them. Darren, his mother, his father. No more calls, no more manipulative messages. It was truly over. Back at Aunt Tessa's, I explained everything. She just hugged me tight and said, "You did the right thing, Ella. It's time to focus on yourself now." And she was right. As I began to put the pieces of my life back together, I found strength I never knew I had. I returned to work with a new vigor, embraced my friends who'd been my support through it all, and started planning for a future that belonged only to me, one filled with possibilities, free from deceit and manipulation.